7. No, I'm not. I'm wearing my
I know.
still don't have the actual warrant. Nobody's handed us a
No, we
copy of
don't.
the warrant.
No, that's a good point.
I'm on Article 8.
Well done.
I have a weapon too. have you seen?
Did it pay up fun yet?
Like cuts down like on all the glare. Whereas everything's fuzzy. Yeah.
Generally relatively
So you see everything in different light. No.
Leanne had sent them around to us yesterday.
We're live.
Oh, I forgot she had. There you go. I mean, fair point. I know. That was even her point. There you go.
Not that crowded.
Let's go. Here, Jim. I'd like to call the meeting, the annual special town meeting to order. My name is Jim Toomey. I'm your new moderator. It's the first time I've done this, so bear with me. We'll see if you're doing that in an hour and a half. We'd like all to stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk has informed me that the warrant has been properly served and posted. And at this point, I would request a motion to waive the formal reading of the warrant. Have a motion? Second. Any discussion? Being none, in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Vote, it is voted.
No, this was just to not read the whole article.
I have nominated Peter Toppin to serve as the deputy moderator. I would entertain a motion to ratify that appointment. Have a motion, second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It's a unanimous vote. I'm going to ask the clerk at this point to swear the moderator and our tellers.
Tellers, could you stand, please, and raise your right hand? All tellers? Do you solemnly swear that you'll faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all duties incumbent upon you as a teller for the town meeting, special town meeting? Thank you for your service.
Okay, we're going to, what I'd like to do is make sure that you have an introduction to the various boards that play a role in this meeting. I'm going to start with Mr. Kelly and ask him to introduce the members of the advisory committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Joining me tonight are the members of the advisory committee who I'm just honored to work with them. They work tirelessly and expertly. Starting to my left is Patrice Metro, Elise Russo, Jamie Gilmore, Lincoln Heineman, a new member, Andrew Goodrich, Mike Westord, and Dan McGuigan. And not with us tonight is Sean DeLacy. I'd also ask the moderator if I could make a comment on a recently retired member of our committee.
That would be appropriate.
So we were very lucky to have as a member of our committee, Anthony Antonellis. Anthony was from Swampscott originally, spent a a good amount of his time in his early years in the Middle East. And in 1975, found his way to Scituate as the Director of Public Works. And he held that position for 32 years. He was with us during the blizzard of '78, the no-name storms, and many other storms. And along with Paul Scott and Hetty Fields, he put our town back together. Recently, Anthony served as the elder statesman for the advisory committee. And he also was the archivist for everything that happened in town. And when we consider a warrant article, Anthony would tell us the why and the backgrounds. So on behalf of my fellow members of the advisory committee, I'd like to thank Anthony for his years of service. And Anthony, where are you? Would you? Come here, Anthony. Anthony, come here. Anthony also modernized our water treatment facility and our wastewater treatment facility, and this is what he had to deal with. So, Anthony, thank you.
Well done, Anthony.
Next, I'm going to call on Chairman Anthony Vignani for the selectmen to introduce the selectmen and members at his table. You might have something to add to the last presentation, too, I think.
No, the Board of Selectmen also wants to thank Anthony for all his years of dedication to the town. Thank you for not only serving the town in your official job capacity, but also in the advisory also. So thank you, Anthony. My name is Tony Vignani, and I am the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and I'll introduce everyone at the table to the right. We've got Nancy Holt, our financial director, Jim Boudreau, the town administrator, Sean Harris, our senior selectman, Maura Curran, selectman, Selectman Karen Canfield, Selectman Karen Conley, and Town Council Cindy Amaro. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, ask Janet Lindblom, Chairman of the School Committee, to introduce the school committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd like to introduce the school committee, starting with the Vice Chair, Peter Gates, Nicole Brandolini, Mr. Ron Griffin is Superintendent, and Mike Long. Thank you.
Thank you. We have three more committees who have a role in the meeting and required by statute or bylaw to make recommendations to the committee, and I'm going to ask if we can briefly introduce them. I'm going to ask Chairman Kasha for the Capital Planning Committee to introduce himself and his members.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Chris Karsher. I'm chairman of the Capital Planning Committee. The other members of my committee are newest member John McCarthy, Jack Whitaker, Joe Gibbons, Michael Clark. Michael Hayes is our representative from the school committee. Jim Boudreau, the town administrator. Elise Russo is our representative from the advisory board. Karen Conley is our selectman representative. Thank you.
And the planning board will have recommendations for us tonight on the zoning articles. I'd ask Ms. Burbine if she would introduce herself and her board.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ann Burbine. I'd like to introduce Steve Pritchard, who is Vice Chair. I'd like to introduce Patty Lambert, Ben Bornstein, Rebecca Lewis, Karen Joseph, who is our Administrative Assistant Planner. Bill Limbacher was unable to be here this evening, and Brad Washburn, who is our Planning Director. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And for the Community Preservation Committee, is Mr. Finley present? I guess not. Well, we'll hear from the Community Preservation Committee as we get into their articles. All right, next, we want to take a moment and in memoriam of town employees who have passed since we were last together at the annual town meeting. They are Ann Hemmicker from the school department, Florence Field from the school department, Philip Vonderstein, plumbing inspector, Susan Chesham from the school department, and Helen Mahoney from the school department. Can we have a moment of silence in memoriam of them? Thank you. Next, I see to my right, we have our representative to the United States Congress. Stephen Lynch is present. He's requested a minute or two to bring us up to date on his activities in Washington. I've informed him he's subject to the same 10-minute limit that everybody else is, so
I understand.
we'll see how he
Thank
does.
you very much, Mr. Moderator. I appreciate your courtesy. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and my colleagues in government. Thank you for allowing this courtesy. I know that there are 14 items on the warrant, so I'll be really brief. There are important items to discuss here. The activity in Washington has been largely focused, as you know, on the ongoing impeachment inquiry. However, it's been a tradition at these town meetings not to get into politics. So even though I'm on the one of the principal committees and I spend quite a bit of my time over the past 5 weeks in classified depositions, I would rather describe some of the other things that you don't know are going on in Washington, D.C. We've dealt with a number of very important bills over the past few weeks, and I'd like to just go over a few of those. We did pass H.R. 1 in the House and the SAFE Act, which deal with securing our elections here in Massachusetts and across the country. Believe it or not, there are about 9 states that do not have paper backups on their election systems. And so they are vulnerable to cyber hacking, which could actually, in their case, affect the outcome of the election. There were 14 different intel agencies that reported with high confidence that there had been cyber intrusions and interference from foreign governments in our 2016 election, as well as our 2018 midterms. And so we're very concerned about what some of those governments might have planned for us in 2020. The SAFE Act and H.R. 1 provided about $400 million to states across the country to provide paper backup systems and also adopt other resiliency measures to protect the elections. Massachusetts is one of the models, I would say. We've got one of the most secure voting systems, due in large part to our Secretary of State, Bill Galvin, who is recognized sort of as an expert in election security. I actually had a hearing on this in my Committee on National Security, and we invited Bill down basically to educate some of the other states on what we are doing. Additionally, just a few weeks ago, the House passed H.R. 4617, which is the SHIELD Act. It actually focuses on foreign interference, in particular, requiring campaigns to report any illicit offers of assistance from foreign governments and their agents. This bill will also improve transparency of online political advertisements and close loopholes that allow foreign governments to actually spend money in our elections. I was pleased to see that the SHIELD Act also included an amendment that I had offered. It was actually a bill, but it was adopted as an amendment to prevent the use of deep fakes in federal elections. Those deep fakes, they're just digital clips that are very, very difficult to uncover. They're very well accomplished, and they can look real. But anyway, we created both a criminal and a civil penalty for their use in federal elections. The House has also passed H.R. 8, which is the bipartisan background checks bill, which actually gives law enforcement, does a number of things, but one of the most important things it does is it gives law enforcement a little bit more time to conduct background checks. If you recall the shooting at the South Carolina church and also out in California, the weapons were legally obtained because the authorities were not allowed enough time to complete the background checks. They were required after 72 hours to issue the gun purchase permit, even though they had not completed the background check. So the background check under this bill would be expanded to 10 days, which they say they would be able to accomplish virtually all of the background checks that are required. Our national security posture also includes the status of our sons and daughters in uniform. And last week, the House passed the bipartisan H.R. 886, which is a Veterans Treatment Court Coordination Act, which helps our veterans who might be accused of nonviolent drug offenses. This bill would simply require that they receive treatment rather than as incarceration as a first approach. Scituate has a long and proud tradition of patriotic service to our nation, and it's one of my favorite responsibilities as a congressman to nominate young men and women of outstanding character and academic accomplishment to the academies. Currently in Scituate, we have several of your sons and daughters attending the academies. I'll just mention a few. Adam Jennings, United States Naval Academy, class of 2021. His parents are Christian and Renee. I believe his dad was United States Naval Academy graduate of 1992. They live at 20 Lawson Road. He's a graduate of Boston College High School. And he was just up to address, he was in Braintree this weekend to address our Academy Day for younger people who might be thinking about applying to the military academies. In addition, Johan Johnson, United States Air Force Academy, class of 2020. His parents are Carol Clayson and Tristan Johnson, 425 Hatherley Road, a graduate of Scituate High School. And Tom McGowan, United States Naval Academy, class of 2020. I think he graduates in May. His parents are Christine and Brian, 9 Briarwood Lane. He's also a graduate of Boston College High School. In fairness, we also on occasion have some of our young people who serve in the Peace Corps. And I found out not long ago I was in Darfur near the border with Chad and Sudan and Africa. I had an opportunity to meet with some of the young women from our district who are serving there, actually in very remote parts of Africa, mostly educating tribal members on avoiding HIV infection, which was and is at epidemic levels. In some cases, these young women were operating hundreds of miles from any village or running water, and their service was simply heroic. There's no other way to describe that. So after I saw that, I made a rule that whenever we receive information that someone in our district is serving the Peace Corps, I would acknowledge them. So tonight I'd like to acknowledge and thank Jonathan Ritchie. His parents are Jonathan and Maria, Scituate High School, class of 2015. He left earlier this year to serve in Ecuador in an area that is facing serious challenges. He'll be serving there until March of 2021. In closing, I want to thank you for being involved in town meeting. I think Scituate is a shining example of what is best about America. You care deeply for your seniors, you honor your veterans, and you're intensely mindful of your children's future. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to represent you in the United States Congress. May God bless the town of Scituate, and may God continue to bless these United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Thanks for what you do for our district. At this point, we'll get down to business. A few introductory remarks. as to the process that we're going to follow. This town meeting is the executive branch of the town government in Scituate. The executive branch is represented here by the school committee and the Board of Selectmen. But as a legislative branch, we are all here as citizen legislators, and it is the legislators' meeting, it's the citizens' meeting here today, not a meeting for the selectmen, not a meeting of the school committee, but a meeting of you, the voters in the town. At this meeting, you should have the opportunity to question the executive on proposals they're putting before the meeting, find out information, challenge them. That's your right as a citizen, and that's the purpose of the town meeting. Word on the advisory committee. The advisory committee is appointed and is required to review each and every warrant article that comes before the town meeting, and to review that. They put in countless hours preparing for both the special and the annual town meeting. They come purely from the standpoint of representing the voters in the town and being able to do the kind of in-depth analysis of the issues that are coming before you. They're here for your benefit, and I strongly recommend that you listen carefully to their recommendations. Needless to say, we have to have some procedural rules under our bylaws. We're governed by the book called Town Meeting Time, which sets out the procedures to be followed at the town meeting. First, we want to be clear that all non-voters should be seated in the non-voting section. The exception would be anybody who's a consultant with one of the town boards or one of the representatives of one of our department who are here to advise us and provide information. Ordinarily, we only would allow registered voters to address the meeting. If someone comes forward to represent somebody or to provide information, we will allow that unless I hear an objection from someone as to the non-registered voters speaking. If, as you wish to address the meeting, you must be recognized by the moderator. You need to identify yourself and your address before you speak. If there's any particular relationship, for instance, an attorney representing a client, that should be made known to the meeting as well. If you are an article sponsor, you'll have 10 minutes to make your presentation. You make your motion first, and then you can make your presentation after the motion has been on the floor. It's necessary for the motion to be made, and the motion to be seconded before we have discussion. The time limits that we have are, other than sponsors of the motion, 10 minutes. Initial speakers on an article would be 5 minutes. You cannot come back and speak a second time on an article until everyone else has had a chance that wants to speak. And on a second round of discussion, you're limited to 3 minutes. I'd ask if, for the most part, people can try to go to the center microphone. Makes it easier to keep track. I try to keep track of people in the order that they go to the microphones so that everyone gets a fair chance to have their say. I'd ask that any discussion of by any speaker be limited to the issues that are in the motion. I'd ask that we not have any discussion of personalities or any disparaging remarks. Through me, you can ask questions of any town official. They don't necessarily have to answer your question, but we can pose a question if you have one, and that's done through the moderator. It is not an exchange process of back and forth. There is a process by which you can end debate. It's called I move the question. That motion is one in which you are interrupting and asking that all debate on a motion is ended. I will accept that motion only in an instance where it's clear that people have had a fair opportunity to discuss an issue. It can't be used as a strategic weapon to try and cut out discussion by someone who may have a different point of view. I would also point out that that motion is to be made on its own. It cannot follow someone's presentation. You're not allowed to get up and get the last word in and then try and cap it off and say, I move the question and get the last word. On voice votes, I'll do my best to make a call based upon what I hear. If there is any feeling that I have misread the audience based upon the voice call, 7 people can rise and ask for a counted vote. We'll do our best to call these so that that's not necessary, but if anyone feels a call is incorrect, 7 people have the right to get up and ask for a counted vote. That's also true. We have in our bylaws, we've accepted a state law that allows the moderator here to call a 2/3 vote. And again, 7 people may rise any time that that call is made. If I were to make a call that a vote passes by 2/3, if you doubt that based on the voice vote, 7 people rise, we will have a counted vote in that instance. In the event we have a counted vote, anyone that is not seated on the floor or in the bleachers will not be counted, so you have to take seats for the purposes of voting. I'd ask everybody to silence their cell phones, and in the event that someone has the need, we have 2 wireless microphones which we can bring to you in the event that you're not comfortable coming up to the microphone. I notice we have another representative in the room. Representative Kearney is here. He's a Scituate resident. We appreciate him coming to the meeting. Okay, you should have 3 pieces of paper that as you entered the room. One is the report of the advisory committee. That has the recommendation of the advisory committee on each article that we have in the meeting. There is also a consent agenda, which I'll explain in just a minute. We'll take that up. And then lastly, there is a change with respect to the zoning article on the signs. And a copy of those changes is in the back of the room. You should have gotten those as you came into the meeting. Now, to the consent agenda. This is a relatively recent thing we've been doing in Scituate. The idea is that some of these votes seem to be routine, and we'd make an effort in order to streamline the meeting to handle these as a block. At the same time, we don't want to deny anyone the opportunity to have a say on something as we go through this process. So tonight we have Articles 1, 4, 9, 10, and 11, which we're going to ask be taken up as a block with 1 motion and 1 vote. The process will be, I will go through, just briefly describe each of them. If someone feels that one of these items should be taken up separately, if they just put hold on it, we will take that out separately. It will then fall into its normal place in the warrant. So at this point, I think we can get a motion from the selectmen.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Before I start, I want to quickly thank a couple groups. One, I want to thank the advisory committee. Served on there for 6 years. A ton of work goes into getting this booklet ready for you guys, and it's available. I hope you all took the time to read it and get knowledgeable on the articles we're going to talk about tonight. And secondly, I want to thank all of you for showing up and just showing how you feel about town meeting and that it's important to be involved and make these important decisions for the town. So thank you both for that. That being said, I will make a motion. I move that the town vote to take Articles 1, 4, 9, 10, and 11 out of order and that they be passed by consent in accordance with the motion shown on the consent agenda distributed this evening.
So moved.
So, like the moderator mentioned a second ago, probably about 2 or 3 years ago, we started doing these consent articles. And they're really typically non-controversial administrative articles that we try and combine together and pass to keep the meeting moving a little bit quicker. I'll give a quick 10-second on each one. The first, number 1 is a bookkeeping article. Number 2 is approving a loan for seawall repair from FEMA. Number 2 meaning number 4. Number 9 is some just language change to the Council on Aging guidelines or bylaws. Number 10 is an amendment to just a language change to the plastic bag bylaw. And number 11 is basically a tax exemption for Gold Star families. The board decided that the 3 of these are non-controversial and have asked you to do them in a consent motion.
So we have an affirmative motion from the Board of Selectmen on the consent agenda. Do I have a second? All right, I'm going to go through the articles on the consent agenda. If anyone wants them removed from that agenda, they just please speak up loudly and say hold. Article 1 is unpaid bills and amounts due to town from prior fiscal years. Article 4 is to allow the town to accept a FEMA loan. Article 9 is to expand the composition of the Council on Aging. Number 10 is to change some technical language with respect to the plastic bag bylaw. Number 11 is a local acceptance of a statute which allows for a tax exemption for Gold Star families. Did I hear a hold? All right, we have a hold on Article 11. We will consider that when we get to Article 11 and the warrant. With respect to Articles 1, 4, 9, and 10, I ask if the advisory committee has a recommendation.
The advisory committee supports the consent agenda as written on all of these articles.
Thank you. We're now, in order to vote for these, the unpaid bills requires a 9/10 majority, so if we get a unanimous vote, we can have an easy read on this. All in favor of the consent agenda items, accepting the Article 11, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? It's a unanimous vote. We move now to Article 2, which are budget reconciliations to account for changes that have occurred since the annual town meeting. We have a motion from the Board of Selectmen, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town appropriate the sum of $810,229.50 for the purpose of balancing the fiscal year 2020 operating budget pursuant to Articles 4, 6, 7, 8 of the April 8th, 2019 annual meeting warrant to provide additional funding to the following budget lines. DPW Highway Roadworks Maintenance, $859.50. Inspection Department part-time salaries, $28,127. Board of Selectmen Town Administrator contractual bargaining, $75,000. Information Technology Technical Services, $46,300. School Department, $242,943. Sewer Enterprise Electricity, $45,000. Sewer Enterprise Repair and Maintenance, $16,000. Sewer Enterprise Chemicals, $21,000. Transfer Station Enterprise Hauling Costs, $114,000. Widows Walk Enterprise Repair and Maintenance, $21,000. And Waterways Enterprise Capital Outlay for Town Marinas, $200,000. and to meet such appropriation, transfer the sums of $859.50 from rideshare funds reserved for appropriation, raise and appropriate the sum of $392,370 from the fiscal year 2020 tax levy, transfer the sum of $82,000 from available funds in the sewer enterprise receipts, transfer the sum of $5,000 from the transfer station enterprise fuels and lubricants, transfer the sum of $5,000 from the transfer station enterprise vehicle services, transfer the sum of $104,000 from the transfer station enterprise receipts, transfer the sum of $21,000 from the Widows Walk receipts, transfer the sum of $50,000 from annual town meeting April 2013, Article N, granite block anchors, transfer the sum of $25,000 from annual town meeting April 2012, Article 4W, South River launch, transfer the sum of $48,611.05 from the annual town meeting April 2017, Article 3T, upgrade Cole Parkway Marine Electrical, transfer the sum of $12,782.17 from the special town meeting April 2019, Article 1, FEMA electrical repairs, transfer the sum of $57,000 from annual town meeting April 2019, Article 3W, replace pump out boat, and the transfer of the sum of $6,606.78 from the Waterways Enterprise retained earnings.
Have a motion. Is there a second? Second.
Great. Thank you. So I just went through a bunch of items that are going to be changes to our fiscal year 2020 budget. There are, I can run through them quickly and kind of just tell you conceptually. There are expenses that are being added and the money that's being accumulated to pay for them. The first one is we received some extra money from the state for an Uber surcharge, and that has to be passed by you so that we can spend it. That's $800. Then there are two sets of expenses that are coming up because we received more money from state aid. And we split that 2/3, 1/3 with the school, and the town is spending that money on their $75,000 for increase for accrued paybacks. So in the past, we've had accrued paybacks where people have retired and they've had a lot of payback money that they would get at the end for unused vacation time or what have you, and we've had an expense that we haven't had money for, so we're accruing that now for that possibility. If it doesn't get used, it just goes back to free cash. And information technology, $46,000 because we have to update our licensing fees that are becoming expired. And then the school is taking their portion of that, the $242,000, and putting that towards their sped expense, which is going to be high this year, I think particularly because a couple of people have moved in and services are increasing. The one other expense that's being included there is part-time for an inspection, part-time salary. We've realized that we've been underpaying that fee as competitive fees regarding to the what our towns around us are charging. So we are increasing the budget line for that, and that is going to be paid for an increase in fees for the service. Then there's some increases in the sewer enterprise fund, which are being paid for by the increase in fees. The transfer station, the fees that we expected to pay for hauling costs are going to be higher, and we have increased the fees to cover that as well. Widows Walk is repair of the maintenance shed, and that's going to be paid by their fees, which are higher this year than in the past. And lastly, for the waterways, there's $200,000 for some piling projects. This is a grant that's paying for this. What the waterways did is they took a bunch of projects that I just read that were completed, but there was excess money, and they're giving that money back to pay for this. And this is, like I said, a grant that I think it's not FEMA, it's Seaport Economic Advisory is paying $700,000 towards this, and we have to participate at 30%, and so we're giving about $200,000 for that. The Board of Selectmen voted unanimously in support of this motion.
Thank you. We have a recommendation from advisory.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Tony. I'm not going to repeat everything that Tony just said. There are some notable things here. We were out of compliance with Microsoft on our licensing. This isn't an option. We've got to be in compliance going forward, and that's an ongoing cost. I think that it's appropriate for us to reserve for unanticipated retirements. We had 3 of those at the end of last fiscal year, and there was a significant charge for that. We have the money that we'll be able to reserve for that going forward. These are usually longer tenured employees that have more of a significant financial impact. And if we take a look at the Town Marina Pilings project, this has been ongoing for quite some time. The Seaport Economic grant that we have covers 70% of the cost. By approving this, our ongoing maintenance charges should go down because we're going to have a newer quality offering at the Town Marina. The advisory committee considered all of these carefully and discussed all of these, and we voted unanimously 7-0 in favor of this article.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Any discussion? Gentleman in the center microphone.
Good evening. The first one this evening to ask a question. The Microsoft...
I'm sorry, I didn't get your name and address.
Bernie Westerveld, 12 Harborview Road.
Thank you.
The Microsoft licensing fees. How many computers? What licenses? It looks kind of rich to me.
Do we have an answer to the gentleman's question? Yep. If you could identify yourself, please.
Mike Mincello, Town IT Director.
Thank you.
So currently we're licensed for Windows 2008. As of January 14th, Microsoft is no longer supporting that. So we have to repurchase all of our server licenses. And that includes the server license and all the client access licenses. Same with SQL Server, so the database servers that we have, email servers, and then other client access license that go along with all of that. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, this motion requires a majority vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. It's a unanimous vote. Moving on to Article 3, which is the Capital Improvement Plan. I have a motion from Mr. Vignani again.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is the Capital Improvement Plan. I move that the town appropriate the sum of $3,988,955 for the purpose of funding capital projects as listed in the printed warrant, and to meet such appropriation, transfer the funds of $98,875 from free cash for the purpose of constructing Hummerock Fire Status Station Apparatus Bay, transfer the sum of $192,585 from free cash for the purpose of information technology upgrades and licensing, transfer the sum of $193,645 from free cash, transfer the sum of $29,275 from the Recreation Revolving Fund, transfer the sum of $17,775 from Waterways Enterprise Retained Earnings, transfer the sum of $37,925 from the Sewer Enterprise Retained Earnings, transfer the sum of $35,650 from the Water Enterprise Retained Earnings for the purpose of making security upgrades to the town facilities. Transfer the sum of $100,000 from the annual town meeting, April 2019, Article 3C, ADA Evaluation and Transition Plan. Transfer the sum of $400.50 from annual town meeting, April 2014, Article 5F, voting machines. Transfer the sum of $26,000 from the special town meeting of November 2018, Article 2, Town Share MVP Grant, and transfer $75,824.50 from free cash for the purpose of a facility study and maintenance plan for town buildings. Transfer the sum of $175,000 from the Water Enterprise retained earnings for the purpose of water meter replacement, and authorize the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, to borrow the sum of $3 million in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, subsection 7, or any other enabling authority for the purpose of design, engineering, and replacement of water mains. And further, that the selectmen are authorized to apply for grants, gifts, and donations for the purpose of this vote from federal, state, and private sources. And the said selectmen are hereby authorized to accept such grants, gifts, and donations on behalf of the town, and that the amount of the authorized borrowing shall be reduced by the amount of the grants, gifts, and donations received prior to any such borrowing.
Do we have a second? Second. Mr. Vignani.
Thank you. So what I just went through is, you can see in the booklet that you have that there's 6 capital items that we're talking about this evening, and I just read through all the ways that we're going to get money to pay for those 6 things. Some of them are closing articles that were already done, that there was excess money. A lot of it came from free cash. Some of it came from retained earnings from the enterprise funds, and some of it is coming from borrowing money, particularly the largest one at the end. I know capital is probably going to go over these articles, so I'll go through them briefly. There's some money that's needed to finish the Hummerock Fire Station and the apparatus bay there. We've already put about $350,000 into that, and it needs another $98,000. There's information technology money that's needed, $192,000 for that. That includes about $75,000 worth of software to upgrade everybody's Office Pro, about $100,000 worth of equipment, and then about another $20,000 worth of firewall protection software and equipment. The other item is security upgrades to facilities. So last year we did the school, and now we're going to upgrade the security at 11 other buildings in the town. There's a facility studies that's going to look at all of the buildings in town and find out what the condition of the buildings are and come up with an annual maintenance plan for them. I think there's 25 buildings that are going to be surveyed and a 20-year maintenance plan for each one. There's $175,000 going for water meters. We are currently out of water meters, and we need to buy inventory to get them. They are paid by the users when they actually get the water meter installed. And lastly is the big ticket item, $3 million to continue to replace our water lines in town. So about 10 years ago, we'll be talking about water shortly. About 10 years ago, we started a process of upgrading all of our water lines that had not been maintained for some of them up to over 100 years. And this is this year's investment in that. It's going to basically change and replace 2-inch galvanized lines. There are about 2.5 miles of pipe that we're going to replace, and it also includes gate valves, 35 hydrants, 260 services. So about 260 people will get new pipes going to their house. The Board of Selectmen voted unanimously in support of this motion.
Hey, I'd ask for the advisory committee recommendation.
Thank you for that great explanation. I just want to add that the advisory committee did recommend approval of all of these with unanimous votes, with the exception of the security upgrades to the town facilities where the vote was 6-1. Thank you.
And under our bylaws, we're required to have a recommendation from the Capital Planning Committee. Mr. Kasher.
The Capital Planning Committee voted unanimously to recommend all 6 items in Article 3.
Thank you. Now, discussion. Gentleman on my left.
Matthew Brown, 122 Tilden Road. I have a question about the security upgrades in the schools. Does that include locks for the doors of the classrooms?
We get an answer from Mr. Vignani.
The motion that we're discussing this evening does not include the schools. The schools was done in the last annual town meeting. This is for 11 town buildings.
Well, it says funds, what about the security upgrades to school facilities? First sentence.
There's none in the one that we're voting on this evening.
Well, then why is that sentence there?
All right, I'd ask if you direct your questions through the chair.
I'd like to know why the sentence is there, Mr. Moderator.
Yes, Mr. Vignani.
It reads, at the April 2019 town meeting, it was given to the school, which was the last annual town meeting that we had. Do you want to know if the locks were repaired?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
Superintendent of Schools.
Hi, yes, locks were repaired for all the schools, and we are in the process of upgrading several sets of locks as well in some of our oldest schools.
Thank you.
Gentleman at the center mic.
James Hunt, Manlot Road, is not necessarily a question, but a request of the advisory board. In years past, these types of budget reconciliation and fund transfers have always identified the source of the funding in the advisory booklet, which is published, of course, in advance. It gives us the time to review that. I heard for the very first time a recitation of those sources. I have no true idea what I was listening to. So I would request that in the future, the source of the funding for each and every item be listed in the advisory booklet as it has been in the past. Thank you very much.
Your request was noted. Lady on my right.
Jennifer Kuhn, 20 Carrie Litchfield Lane. I had a question about the number 4, facilities study and the maintenance plan for the town buildings. It's $208,000, $225,000. And you had mentioned the advisory committee. So it was recommended at the annual town meeting that we do a study to find out what buildings we have and what condition they're in. But I think that this study or this dollar amount that we're asking for is a little bit more than I heard was requested, because it says that this study would respond to that request as well as enhance the capital planning process by providing anticipated costs. I'm not sure at this point that we need to spend that much money to provide anticipated costs, because they're constantly increasing, and we may not decide to go through with a lot of those anticipated costs. So I think that it's just another study and consultant fees for this, and I would ask to reduce that amount, something a little more manageable, maybe $225,000.
Are you proposing a motion to amend?
Yes.
And could we have exactly what it is you would like to change?
I'd like to change the dollar amount to $108,000, $225,000, and remove the anticipated costs.
Oh, yeah. No, we get the motion first. I want to be clear on what the motion is. You want to take item number 4, $208,000, and what would you do in its place?
Reduce that by $100,000.
So it would read $108,225,000 under item 4, facilities study and maintenance plan for town building.
Correct.
All right, the motion is to amend the amount under item 4, facilities study and maintenance plan for town buildings, from what was put in the warrant at $208,225 to $108,225. Is there a second for the motion to amend? Motion has been seconded. Discussion.
It was requested at the previous town meeting that we need a study of how many buildings we have, what condition they're in, and what we're going to do with them. And I think that we definitely need the study done, but I think that this amount could be reduced and avoid providing the anticipated costs. I think we just need an evaluation of the buildings we have and what condition they're in. I don't think we need to anticipate how much it's going to cost to fix what needs to be fixed. I think that after the fact, when we get the study, we can go through building by building and decide what anticipated costs we want to move forward with.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion to amend. Go ahead, Nancy Holt.
The motion that was put on the floor for $208,000 does not include any repair costs. So I'm confused by your discussion of anticipated costs. It calls for a valuation of 25 town buildings. To give you an idea of the scope, the facility conditions survey and master plan will focus on the following property elements: code compliance, structural integrity, physical conditions of the building, interior and exterior, walls, roofs, windows, floors, masonry, etc., technology, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire, life safety, boiler, furnace, condenser, heat pump, building and site utilities, special electrical systems, energy assessment, handicapped accessibility, which we did just do our own ADA plan, which we've told that any consultant that bid that we would provide, environmental regulation, budget cost estimate for maintenance, time schedule for maintenance, compliance with stretch codes, and recommendations for specialized staffing in place of contractual agreements. So what we would get for each building would be an evaluation of the building's current conditions and any recommendations, and they would look at any deficiencies and prioritize them. Priority 1 would be current critical conditions in this category, including cited safety hazards to stop accelerated deterioration, return a facility to operation. Priority 2 would be potentially critical, something that would interrupt intermittent interruptions to operations or rapid deterioration or potential life safety hazards. Priority 3, necessary but not critical. Priority 4, recommended. It's only looking for anything that has a value of over $25,000, which is what is needed for a capital project. And any building that is currently under a separate study right now is not included in this study. So by reducing it to $108,000, this study cannot go forward. This was put out to bid. There were 2 bidders, neither of which has ever worked for the town before, so 2 independent consultant firms. One came in at $208,000, the other came in at $340,000. So I think by what I described, I think for $208,000, we're getting something that the town desperately needs and has been looking for many years, and we'll have a deliverable of a 20-year maintenance plan that we can now build into our capital plan.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion to amend. Gentlemen at the microphones speaking to they were up before we had the motion.
So this is not to amend.
No, the question is whether we amend the motion from the 208,000 figure to the 108,000 figure.
I have a different question on.
Okay, we'll hold on for you. Same. Any further discussion with respect to the motion to amend?
I had one more point I wanted to make.
Go right ahead.
This was asked for, and it is desperately needed, but it does say that this study would respond to that request as well as. So we have added a lot more to that request than we've actually asked for. And everything that you just discussed and recited, nobody's seen any of that. So I don't think we can move forward with spending $208,000 on something that we haven't seen the details for.
Mr. Boudreau.
Mr. Moderator, this is Matt Brown's fault. It was his idea, Matt. What this is going to give us, what we've been criticized for, is we have all these plans and we don't have any action to do with those plans. What this is going to do is look at every single one of our buildings that has not recently been looked at, tell us the condition of every single system and building component in that particular building, and then put it on a 20-year capital plan with a cost so we can sit down with the capital budget committee and actually do some planning on how we're gonna maintain our buildings. As Nancy said, we went out to bid, we did an RFP, we've picked a firm. This is the cost for that study. If you don't wish to do the study, just don't vote for it, because voting less money means we're not gonna do it. So if you think we need to plan and have an action set to maintain and take care of our public infrastructure, please reject this amendment and vote the $208,000. If you don't think we need it, then just submit the whole thing, cut it out, and we won't do it. But this was asked for by town meeting, it's desperately needed, and it will allow us to do something that's actually planning and give the capital budget something to work with. So I ask you to defeat the amendment and pass this as it's written.
Further discussion on the motion to amend?
Andrew
Gentlemen,
Boyle, 36 Station Street. I'd like to move the question on the amendment.
we have a motion to move the question, but I don't think we have anyone else up to discuss it, so I don't think that's necessary. I'll call for a vote on the motion to amend. This requires a majority vote. The question before you is whether to change that number in Article 3, under item number 4, Facility Study and Maintenance Plan, to change the number in the original motion for $208,000 to $108,225. All those in favor of the motion to amend, say aye. Those opposed, no. Motion fails. We're back to the main motion, and the gentleman in the middle microphone is up next.
My name's Tom McCusker from Gannett Pasture Lane, 50 Gannett Pasture Lane. My question is on the facilities maintenance plan also. Is a few years ago we hired a facilities manager. The facilities used to be done by the town administrator, and it was too much for the previous town administrator, so they hired a facilities manager. I thought that's what his job was, to do this kind of stuff. So why do we have to hire an outside contractor to tell us what we need to have done in our buildings?
Mr. Boudreau can answer your question.
We do have a facilities manager. We have a very small facility staff. This is really beyond their scope or their ability to do. We don't have the staff, the time, or the expertise. They'll be bringing in elevator people. They'll be bringing in fire suppression people. They'll be bringing in structural people. They'll bring in roof people. So all the people that specialize in those particular aspects of the building will come in and take a look at those and tell us what needs to be done. And then the facilities manager will take that plan and take the funds and then make those repairs. But this is beyond what he does and beyond our ability to do with the staff that we have.
But I thought when he was hired a few years ago that that's what his job was. The town administrator used to do that.
Sir, do you have a question?
That's my question, is why do we hire a town, a facilities manager if that's not what he's going to do?
Again, we have a facilities manager, but the amount of work here, he would be doing this and he wouldn't be fixing anything. Right now, his responsibility is to make the repairs that the town has voted. This is beyond his scope and beyond his expertise because of the wide range of things that need to be done. One person is not going to have the expertise in all these different subcategories in order to do this study. So we bring in experts and have them do it.
Thank you. Gentleman to my left in the Red Sox hat.
Andrew Boyle, 36 Station Street. I was going to move the question, but I think we might have another.
We'll give this lady on my right a chance to speak. Ma'am.
I'm Mary Feeney from 50 Country Road, and it's not related to what's going on. So I just had a clarification question. The water meter replacement, $175,000. Did I understand you correctly when you said that the town currently doesn't have any water meters?
Mr. Boudreau.
No, we don't have any more funds to buy additional water meters. So we have some on hand, but we need to keep buying them on a regular basis to replace them.
Okay, and pending the approval of the article, what's the turnaround rate, once funded, what's the turnaround rate on receiving new water meters? Approximately.
Cap, how long to get meters? How long to get a meter? Once they're funded, about a week, he said, and then it's done on a rolling basis. So as they run out, they just order more.
So weekly, approximately.
Well, they would order some, and then when they needed more, they would order some. They wouldn't, but if we ran out of meters today, it'd take about a week to get
A
more
week.
meters.
All right, thank you so much.
Lady at the center microphone.
Good evening, Karen Pritchard, 36 Meeting House Lane. This comment is regarding item number 6, the $3 million requested for additional funds to replace more pipes. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that we need to replace more pipes in this town. What I find, there's a few things about this I find really distressing. Number one is we don't understand what the plan is in town to continue to amend this system so that we actually have a functioning system. We've replaced 22 miles of pipes. We started this thing called ice pigging. We have had an unprecedented number of water main breaks, I think, in the last 6 months. And I don't feel as though the town really understands what the long-term plan is to actually fix our system. And it would be wonderful to understand that in the context of how we are going to be asked to approve funds in the future for the water system, such that this request, had it been part of the main strategy for the water system, should have come up in the annual meeting, as opposed to coming up 6 months later saying, well, now we need to do Part B. Why wasn't this part of the initial request or the annual request for the budget? So I find this topic really miserable. But I'm also really tired of brown water when I've got new pipes on my street, and I know everybody else is really tired of it. And it would be really wonderful if somebody in town with a really big audience who has expertise in this matter could stand up and tell us what it would take to have a world-class water system for residents who actually deserve it. That's my comment.
Thank you. Up to you. Further discussion on Article 3? Gone. We'll call this to a vote. This requires a 2/3 vote because of the borrowing item. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? I declare it a 2/3 vote. If you challenge that call, 7 people can stand and we'll have a count. It's a 2/3 vote. Moving next, Article 4 was taken care of in the consent agenda. Our next article then is Article 5, under the Community Preservation Act, to do work for stone mile markers from historic resources and for the North Scituate train canopy. Selectman Conley.
Good evening, everyone. I move that the town appropriate, on recommendation from the Community Preservation Committee, to appropriate the sums of money as indicated below. Appropriations for the items below are to be expended first from any existing reserves for the purposes of such item, with any excess to be appropriated from community preservation reserves or undesignated funds. All sums appropriated are further to be expended subject to all terms and conditions of the applications regarding such projects filed with the CPC and the votes of the CPC regarding approval of such items. $5,000 for stone mile markers from historic reserves and $85,000 for the North Scituate canopy from historic resources.
Okay. Do we have a vote and recommendation from the Community Preservation Committee?
Dan?
I understood that that vote had been taken and is on record. Can someone confirm that? Could you come to the microphone, please, sir?
Dan Fenley, Acting Chair of CPC. I think the question was, what would the vote?
Was there an affirmative vote to recommend this from the...
Affirmative vote, and it was unanimous on both items.
Thank you very much. And we need a recommendation from the advisory committee on this.
Hey, everybody.
The advisory committee recommends the North Scituate, the mile markers at a unanimous decision, 8-0. The North Scituate train canopy was approved 6-2.
And the Board of Selectmen voted in favor of both of these projects.
We have a motion, and I want to make sure we had a second. We had a second. Discussion. Selectman Conley.
Well, the stone markers, there are 85 of them that stretch from Boston down to the Cape, and they were erected 100 years ago to commemorate the landing of the Pilgrims. We have 3 of them in Scituate. They're in dire need of repair. They're 100 years old by definition, and hopefully they'll get repaired, and this year will mark the 400th anniversary of the landing of the Pilgrims. So we all thought this was a very good project to do. 2 of them may need to be moved because they're in not the best locations, but they'll only be moved in order to make them more visible. As for the train canopy, I'm sure you're all aware of the fact that the roof of the canopy was repaired and was restored, and this is now the second phase of that project. I think we're all aware of the fact as well that North Scituate is in great need of economic boost and to make it more attractive, and this will allow the second phase to be done. We'll put seating and tables and lights, and we'll expand the amount of space that can be used under the canopy. So I think we all, both CPC and the Selectmen, view this as an important project to finish in North Scituate, and we hope you agree with us.
Any further discussion? Gentleman on my left.
Matthew Brown, Matthew Brown, 122 Tilden Road. I'm sure both of these projects are excellent, fine projects. I would just like to remind the Selectmen and the CPC Committee that another charge of the CPC Committee is low and moderate income housing, and I seldom hear that coming from you.
Well, actually...
No. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, I would like to say that Scituate has actually allocated, I think it's $2.5 million to build Lawson Green, which will be affordable housing, and it's in partnership with a private developer. If it succeeds, and we have every reason to think it will succeed, it will put Scituate on the map in terms of using CPC money for affordable housing. It is the most difficult CPC category to make work because it is so expensive to build housing. But with Lawson Green on the agenda and hopefully to break ground very soon, I think we will have gone a long way to making that happen. I think we've all been frustrated over the years about how difficult that is to accomplish.
Congratulations.
Lady at the middle microphone.
It's all up to you.
Good evening. Nancy DeCoste, 22 Bell Tower Lane. Just a point of clarification. On the stone mile markers for $5,000, that was a unanimous vote from the advisory committee, I believe it was. And then the North Scituate train canopy was a vote of, it passed by a vote of 6-2. I was wondering if we could just hear why the 2 votes were a negative, please, and thank you.
The 2 no's, 1 and...
Could you just identify yourself, please?
What is it? What is it?
Name, your name and address.
Oh, Mike Westport, on the advisory board. The 2 no's, 1 was just the proximity to the train itself. Didn't think, benches near the train or whatever else, which was part of the funding, was safe. And the other one thought the use of the funds was more economic development than historical.
Thank you.
Thank you. There being no one at the mics, I think we're ready for a vote on this. It's a majority vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. It's a unanimous vote. Move now to Article 6, zoning, temporary signs. Do we have a motion? And this, as I understand it, is the item that there is a handout on with a revised motion, which I think we're going to hear about.
The Planning Board hereby reports that in accordance with Mass General Laws 20, Chapter 40A, a public hearing was held on this article on September 26, 2019, and closed on the same date. On September 26, 2019, the board voted unanimously to support passage of the article at the November 5, 2019 special town meeting. The changes to the sign bylaws are a necessary legal adjustment in the bylaw to comply with the current case law. The change in the bylaw is a reclassification of signs in all residential districts to temporary signs and remove church and civic group signs. The Planning Board supports this article. Council asked the Planning Board to vote again on this article, and a motion that the Planning Board reaffirms its vote on September 26, 2019 to approve the proposed changes to the sign bylaw to provide necessary legal adjustments to comply with the current case law by providing for temporary signage in all residential zones and removing church and civic signs groups was again voted on October 29th, and all members present and the alternate member present all voted favorably with a unanimous vote.
We have the recommendation. Do we have the actual motion?
I move that the town amend Section 710 of the zoning bylaws as on file in the town clerk's office, including the text of the current zoning bylaw and the complete text of the proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw.
We have a second. Motion is seconded. Have discussion.
I would like...
Gentleman at the middle mic, I think, was up first. No, all right, Mr. Brown. We'll take the gentleman at the...
Matthew Brown, 122 Tilden Road. I'd like to propose an amendment to this motion. Section 710.1.
Excuse me, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 minute.
Go ahead.
Mr. Brown, I apologize. We did not, I neglected to get the recommendation of the advisory committee. So
Go ahead.
Let's get that on record first, and then we'll go back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm sure there'll be discussion in general on what the sign bylaw does, what this proposed change would do. Currently, the town has a sign bylaw that regulates signs based on the type of speech, that is commercial, religious, political, etc. That is on its face unconstitutional. The government may not regulate speech in that way. What the Planning Board is attempting to do is to bring the bylaw into compliance with the First Amendment, and I think we recognize this as a worthy effort. Nevertheless, what we have right now is a poor bylaw. This is, in the advisory committee's opinion, now an ambiguous bylaw, what is proposed before the town meeting now. And so the advisory committee took a vote to not support this change by a vote of 7 with 1 abstention. I know we would encourage, if in fact this new proposed bylaw does not pass this evening, we would respectfully encourage the Planning Board to return and address some of these ambiguities and come back with a new version at annual town meeting. I think the current bylaw is pretty clearly unenforceable due to the First Amendment, so we have this breathing room in the interim, it is unenforceable, to make sure that whatever bylaw does come back is not ambiguous and clear. And I know, obviously, there will be an amendment as well this evening to make some further changes to this. So again, the advisory committee does not recommend approval by a vote of 7 with 1 abstention.
Thank you. Back to the gentleman on my left.
Matt Brown, 122 Tilden Road. Well, I didn't know that the advisory board was going to recommend that this not be passed. Congratulations. It is a confused mess from the planning board I originally stood up to amend section 710.1, paragraph B, subsections 1 and 2, to allow people to put up political signs on their lawn without interference from the planning board. This, in the wisdom of the advisory board, I agree with them. It is unenforceable. This bylaw was attempted to be put into our records last year, and the selectmen, in their wisdom, declared they would not enforce it. So I recommend first to vote for my amendment. And if that passes, then I would vote for you to vote against, this is confusing, but vote against all of 710-1. It is a confused mess and should not be part of Scituate law. Thank you.
Mr. Brown, I'm unclear. Are you making an motion to amend?
I have given you the motion. The motion is very confusing. I'm actually, here's the part that I want struck. Temporary signs and banners are permitted in all zoning districts as follows. First, the planning board thinks that no more than 2 temporary signs may be displayed on a lot, neither one of which can exceed 8 square feet in area, and a temporary sign shall not be displayed for more than 30 days except in the accordance with section 2 below. Section 2, for a period of time beginning 60 days before a municipal, state, or federal election, and for a period of time not to exceed 7 days after said election, there shall be no limit to the number of temporary signs that may be displayed on a lot. What this is attempting to do is to limit your ability to put up signs. Now, we understand that this next year is going to be a very busy political year, and I'm sure that your opinion should be allowed to be expressed, regardless of what the planning board thinks. I would urge you to accept this amendment and then defeat the entire motion. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion to amend, which would entail, as I understand it, striking additional provisions of the sign bylaw which were not referenced in the article. Is that correct?
Here's where the mess comes in. We have had at least 3 different versions of Article 700. 3 of them. The most recent is in the back room on the front of the room on a table. My motion to amend comes from that. As I said before, it's a confused mess. I want you to amend this motion as I described and wrote it out for the town clerk, and then I would ask you to defeat the entire section of limitations on signs until the planning board can get their act together.
Yeah, the problem is I've got the bylaw in front of me. Excuse me, we're going to have to take a minute to sort this out, because I think we're looking at 2 different versions of the bylaw here.
So there's A. So this is how it's going to read after this is voted. So B.
Well, you know what? This because you won. Now we're going to have to
Yeah, I
We
know
have
it,
that, but we're looking at the original bylaws too, and that's just a nightmare.
yeah, but look,
So we have, he wants to take out both of these and just copy. B1 and 2.
but I'm looking at 710 on the bylaw.
Hello there, Superintendent. Quite well. Good to see you. Yeah.
So under your new revised clean copy. Okay, yeah, right. Right.
Gotcha.
So
So
that's here.
you're leaving
We have, Andrew Goodrich.
Okay. All right. I apologize. I understand now.
You
Mr.
do.
Brown has
No, I'll do it.
requested an amendment which would remove the new proposed language presented in the article here. So his amendment is to the proposal before the meeting, not to the existing bylaw.
No, it's the stuff that's been written out and given to the people today.
Okay, so the effect of Mr. Brown's amendment would be to remove any reference to temporary signs relating to an election, in essence. Is that a fair
Good,
statement?
yes, that's fine.
Okay. Now, any discussion, do I have a second for the amendment? I have a second. We have discussion on the amendment. I'm hearing the Board of Selectmen doesn't understand the amendment. In the proposal from the Planning Board, there is language which would change the reference from property protection type signs to allow 2 temporary signs for not more than 30 days, and also allow temporary signs for 60 days with respect to an election. The amendment to the motion is asking that those sections not be included in the new bylaw.
Correct.
Wait a minute. Okay. Are we clear on what the question is? Now, discussion on the amendment. Yes, sir. Yes.
Jamie Gilmore, 735 First Parish Road. I would like to remind everybody, as it was mentioned earlier, the existing bylaw is not enforceable. So if you just, with all due respect, if you just vote no, there's no need to make any further amendments because we're going to send it back to the planning committee and hopefully people can get involved and we can eliminate the ambiguity that we see in this bylaw as presented. Merely to amend it right now, maybe you're afraid it's going to pass, I don't know. But if it doesn't pass, the existing bylaw is unenforceable, so your end is achieved. So thank you for hearing me.
Correct.
Okay, on the amendment, gentleman at the center mic.
James Hunt, Manlot Road, both on the amendment and the main motion. Mr. Moderator, we've not heard a report from the Bylaw Review Committee.
That's correct. This is not, they review general bylaws, not zoning bylaws.
Okay, thank you.
That's committed to the planning board. Any further discussion on the amendment? On the amendment? Okay. The amendment will require a majority vote. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The noes have it. The amendment is defeated. Back to the main motion from the planning board. Gentleman in the center mic.
Bernie Westerveld, Harborview Road. I'm looking at this Article 6 with no text in it referring to online resources, and I'm looking at Article 7 with 2 pages of text. I have the idea that, also listening to the timeline, that this article is sort of rushed through. I'm making a motion to postpone this article to the next town meeting so that we can have an article with text we can read beforehand and study and then vote.
You're going to put me through the paces here now. You're going to give me a minute. All right, I think what we have here is a motion to take from the table. That requires a majority vote, and it is debatable. So we have here a motion to effectively not vote on this and to postpone it. Do we have a second? We have a second. Do we have any discussion? None. Any discussion? The other people at the microphones? Not on the motion to postpone. This requires a majority vote. All those in favor of postponement say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The article is postponed. Thank you. Next item is Article 7. have a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Toppin.
A point of order.
Yes.
Yeah, Pete Toppin, 26 Clap Road. We're dealing with zoning amendments. We have an instance that we just postponed where they were being presented properly, i.e., we had text, we had eliminated lines, we had new text inserted. And then we come to Article 7, which is another zoning article where we do not have the underlined and deleted texts. And I think we as a town should go back to having that for all zoning articles.
I would point out to you that with the prior article, since there was a change from what was originally presented, that was presented with an underline and strikeout. That is not the case, although everything that's going to be presented to you, I'm informed, in this motion is included in the warrant that you have before you. The suggestion is duly noted. At this point, we'll proceed with the article, and people can vote it up and down as they see fit based on what they hear. So I'm looking for a motion on Article 7. Mr. Harris.
I move the town amend Scituate zoning bylaw as on file in the town clerk's office, including the text of the current zoning bylaw, the current zoning map, the complete text of the proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw, and map showing the proposed changes to the zoning map.
Do we have a second? Motion has been seconded. We have a recommendation from the planning board.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Planning Board hereby reports that in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A, a public hearing was held on this article on September 26, 2019, and closed on the same date. On September 26, 2019, the board voted unanimously to support passage of the article at the November 5, 2019 special town meeting. The changes to the Village Center and Neighborhood District zoning bylaw provide more concise, user-friendly version by reorganizing some changes to the Greenbush Driftway area adopted at annual town meeting in April 2019, by relocating definitions and design standards to the appropriate sections of the bylaw, clarifying the table of use by addressing comments from the Attorney General, approval letter regarding child care use facilities, and correcting typographical errors and other clarifications to wording for ease of use. The Planning Board supports this article.
Thank you. Recommendation from the Advisory Committee. Mr. Heineman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As Chair Burbine mentioned, this article would clarify several items in the larger omnibus rezoning that was adopted this past spring annual town meeting. There were a few typographical errors that were identified in our meeting with the planning board, or with members of the planning board and the director of planning development, and to their credit, they made those corrections and we appreciated that. It is a simply clarifying article, and the advisory committee unanimously, by a vote of 7-0, recommends approval of this article.
Thank you. Discussion. Ms. Burbine.
This is truly a housekeeping article. We've changed a couple of things. We've moved definitions. It's become more user-friendly. It really doesn't change the overall scope of the zoning district. Now you can have daycare, now you can have boat storage, and the definitions have been clarified. We wanted it to be more user-friendly going forward. And hopefully, not hopefully, it is more user-friendly. Thank you.
Gentleman at the center mic.
Ken Hirschfield, Captain Pierce Road, and you've answered really all the questions. It just, when you looked at the red line version that was emailed out today, I mean, it was just a wholesale rewrite, and, you know, the clarification is appreciated, so no questions.
Lady at the microphone on my right.
Jennifer Kuhn, 20 Cary Litchfield Lane. Looking at the article and the proposed changes with the deletions and the additions, on page 72, it's on page 72, it's under C, the site landscaping. There's a proposal to remove the green bush, and I would like to amend this to keep the green bush in that section D. So I'll go to, sorry, it's a lot of pages. 750.8, I believe. And, yep, 750.8 under D. It's number 3. It says, in the GB district and Scituate Harbor, they're looking to include just Scituate Harbor and North Scituate, and they're looking to delete or remove the Greenbush Station. And this is to have only one driveway to be allowed on a building lot. So it says, in the Greenbush, currently how it is now, if anybody has the copy, it says, in the GB district in Scituate Harbor, North Scituate, and Greenbush, only one driveway shall be allowed on a building lot. Where more than one curb cut exists, it may remain unless change of use triggers site plan review. So I would like to not delete the Greenbush in number 3. I would like to keep, so remove the red text. So that will just allow one driveway per building lot. If this does go and get approved, we can have more than one driveway per building lot in the Greenbush district or Greenbush area.
One thing at a time. Let's try and understand what the amendment is. So I understand it, if we look at the warrant article and we look at item DD on the second page, your motion to amend is to delete that from the changes that are proposed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the motion to amend is, if you look at the warrant article and you get down on the second page to DD, it says amend section 750.8D3 by removing Greenbush. The requested amendment is to not include that in the changes to the zoning bylaw. Do I have a second on the motion to amend? I don't have a second. I have a second. All right. I think you've had an opportunity to explain it. I'll let Ms. Burbine respond first, and then we'll give you a chance to
Mr. Moderator, through you to Mrs. Kuhn, what is the reason for this change?
I think there should only be one driveway per building lot in the Greenbush district. The same that it is in Scituate Harbor and North Scituate. So we have Scituate Harbor, North Scituate, Greenbush. They should all have one driveway per building lot. We don't need any more paving and driveways.
But you do understand, Mr. Moderator, that if somebody requests, whether it's in Greenbush or anywhere, any other business district, more than one driveway on a lot, it generates a special permit. So if somebody wants, rather a site plan review, so if someone wants a second driveway, there is site plan review. So I think that the amendment is really pointless.
Okay, well, I would disagree.
Well, one at a time. Other discussion on the amendment? Ma'am? Any further discussion on the amendment? There being no further discussion on the amendment, we will vote. The motion is to amend by removing the change contained in item DD of the motion and the warrant article. This requires a majority vote to amend. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion to amend is defeated. Back to the main motion. Any discussion on the main motion? No one's at the mics. This requires a two-thirds vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. It's a unanimous vote. So voted.
Thank you.
Moving next to Article 8, which is to extend the Hummerock Village Residential Overlay District on the zoning map. Mr. Harris.
I move that the town amend the zoning map by amending the zoning district shown as the Humrock Village Residential Overlay Zoning District to include all of the parcel shown on the plan entitled Proposed Extension of Humrock Village Residential Overlay District, Scituate, Massachusetts, prepared by Morse Engineering Incorporated, dated August 31st, 2018, and identified on the Town of Scituate's Assessor's Maps as parcel ID 72-19-5 on file with the Town Clerk's Office.
Do I have a second? I have a second. We have a report from the Planning Board.
The Planning Board hereby reports that in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A, a public hearing was held on this article on September 26, 2019, and closed on the same date. On September 26, 2019, the Board voted unanimously to support passage of the article at the November 5, 2019 special town meeting. The changes to the zoning map will allow for the extension of the Humrock Village Residential Overlay District to extend to the full parcel identified on the Town of Scituate Assessor's Maps as parcel ID number 72-19-15, as was originally proposed in 2008 when the area was first rezoned. The expansion of the Humrock Village Residential Overlay District to this parcel would allow for potential redevelopment of the site. The Planning Board supports this article. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a recommendation from the Advisory Committee.
Yes, good evening. Concurrent with what our zoning official said, we support this 100%. We believe to actually bring in the residential overlay into that area makes sense and actually gives that parcel of land greater flexibility in its future. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion. No one's at the mics. This requires a two-thirds vote. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? No. I declare it a two-thirds vote. If 7 people doubt my count, they can stand and request a counted vote. It's a two-thirds vote. Item passes. Article 9 we took care of in the consent agenda. Article 10 we took care of in the consent agenda. We are now up to Article 11, which is the acceptance of local option acceptance for property tax exemption for Gold Star parents. Thank you. We'll have a motion first.
All right, does this work? Okay. I move that the town accept General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5, Clause 22H, which authorizes a full exemption for surviving parents and/or guardians of soldiers and sailors, members of the National Guard, and veterans who, 1, during active duty service suffered an injury or illness documented by the United States Department of Veteran Affairs or a branch of the Armed Services that was a proximate cause of death, or 2, are missing in action with presumptive finding of death as a result of active duty service as members of the Armed Services of the United States, to be effective for exemptions granted for any fiscal year beginning on or after July 1st, 2019.
Is there a second? Second. Recommendation from advisory.
The advisory committee was unanimous in its support of these families. It's the military distinction that no one wants, and we urge support. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion. Lady at the center mic.
Andrea Hunt, 66 Road. I'd just like a clarification on this. As it is worded, it says Gold Star parents and guardians. It does not say Gold Star families, and I'm wondering if this would also apply to wives and children who are left behind, who would have more of a financial need than parents.
Selectman Campfield.
Thank you. That exemption does exist already on a separate bylaw in our town charter. Or not charter. It's a separate section of the law, and it already applies to the families.
So that's already done.
It's already on the books, and this would extend it to parents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? This requires a majority vote. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Article 12, a bylaw change to impose a water moratorium. We have the petitioner.
John Bemke, 49 Sedgwick Drive, Scituate. Thanks, Jim. John Bemke, 49 Sedgwick Drive, Scituate. As you may have noticed, I have proposed 3 different articles for tonight's meeting. I would like to move with the moderator's permission to consider them in slightly different order.
The motion, I take it, then, is to take Article 13 before Article 12?
Correct.
That requires a 2/3 vote. Is there a second? Is there any discussion? There being no discussion, the question before us is whether to advance Article 13 before Article 12. Requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? I declare it a 2/3 vote. 7 people challenge that. They can stand. It's a 2/3 vote. We now go to Article 13.
Thank you. I move that the town of Scituate petition the legislature for special legislation in substantially similar form as follows, with authorization granted to the legislature to make changes necessary to accomplish the intent of this article or take any other action thereto. Section 1, Statement of Petition Purpose. Whereas the purpose of this petition for legislation to protect public health, safety, and the environment and protect the integrity of the town of Scituate's public water supply systems by prohibiting new connections, systems expansions, and increases in flow for a temporary period of time to allow the town to study system-wide capacity issues and determine whether and upon what terms and conditions such increases in flow may be permitted in the future. This includes, but is not limited to, the following reasons set forth in Section 2. Also, whereas the residents of Scituate have suffered from brown water on a consistent and unremitting basis, whereas the water system requires infrastructure upgrades, whereas time is needed to rectify the deficiencies in the quality and quantity of the public water supply. Now, therefore, the town petitions the Great and General Court, for a special act. Section 2, Water System Connection and Extension Memorandum. For a period of 1 year from the effective date of the petition for legislation, the town shall not approve any application for new connections to the town's public water supply system for an extension to the extension of the town's public water supply system or for increases in flow from existing public water supply system connections or extensions. Okay, so I'm going to just pause for a moment as I'm reading this because I want to let you know that what I'm going to read to you is a revised article, and I'm passing it for the selectmen and for the advisory board. I've underlined the change that I've made. And so if you're following along in the booklet, I'll highlight the change that I've made. Notwithstanding the foregoing sentence and subject to compliance with the requirements of the town's water connection regulations and other applicable laws, the Board of Selectmen or its designee may approve water connection applications for, and this is the change, single-family dwellings, restaurants, commercial service establishments, and then it goes back to the original wording, for properties the building permits for which were issued approved prior to the effective date of this legislation, providing that such building permits have not lapsed, and for properties with on-site wells if the Board of Health orders the property owner to abandon the well and connect to the public water supply. Requests for water connections pursuant to this paragraph will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis and may be denied if it is determined that there is insufficient system availability to accommodate the requested connection or for any other reason set forth in the town's water connection regulations or any other applicable law. And then just add severability, the invalidity of any section, provision, paragraph, sentence, or clause shall not invalidate any other section, paragraph, sentence, or clause.
We have the motion. Is there a second? Motion is seconded. Do we have a recommendation from the advisory committee? Ms. Metro.
A bit like this kind of changes. A little bit out of sorts how we voted for it, and whether we might have changed our minds. Yeah. All right. Well, first of all, yeah. I mean, what I was just saying was I'm a little bit concerned about this because it might very well have changed how we voted on it. We narrowly voted against the 3 of these petitions, but I do think this is quite a significant addition, so I'm not quite sure what I should do, what we should do. I'll tell you why we, the reasons that we decided not to, is that better? Not to recommend approval of it. I mean, clearly everybody in town is frustrated by the brown water. We very much appreciated the petitioner's efforts to help resolve the problem. We had concluded that there was quite a lot new going on in the town, new and continuing efforts. The ice pigging was talked about. There was a new study. There's work on the pipes, and there's a long-term plan about various things, and there's additional money that was put in tonight. So we had narrowly decided not to recommend the petition be approved, and that that the new and continuing efforts by the town should be allowed for the moment at any rate to carry on. We were also concerned about the impact on local builders, and we were concerned that there might be some legally contentious arguments about it too. So those are the reasons why we had voted against the Article 12, which was the water moratorium, and subsequently, since we voted against that, we also voted against the petition for the legislature, and I guess we'll get back to the Water Commission later on. So I don't know what to tell you about that.
Mr. Moderator, point of order.
Who's raising the point of order? Yes, sir.
Paul Barkowitz, 18 Damon Lane. So we have rules for the meeting, and Rule 10 is a rule that lengthy amendments are supposed to be, copies of lengthy amendments are supposed to be provided for everybody, at the front of the room before we come in. And my question is, doesn't that apply to this amendment?
No, I would beg to differ with you. It requires that we have a written copy of the amendment, not that one be ready for distribution. And we have, just before the meeting, we're supplied with a written copy of the amendment. If there's any confusion about what the difference is between what was in the warrant and what the motion was, I'd ask the petitioner to explain that one more time. I think he did a decent job of that initially, but why don't you, if you could do that again, please, just to explain what the difference is between what people have in front of them from the warrant and what has been presented to the town clerk in writing here now.
So rather than say it in the legal terms, I'll say it more in terms of the concept. The original article and motion would have had a moratorium on all water connections, so that for during that period of time, with that rare exception of someone who has a well and then the Board of Health says they can't have that well anymore, basically no water connections. And so the revision to the motion is to say, well, the intent is to reduce the large-scale development and to allow small developments such as single-family dwellings and commercial businesses that are not large consumers of water. And so the exact language is that it inserts the words single-family dwelling, restaurants, commercial service establishments, and those are terms that are defined in the zoning bylaws.
Thank you. Is there any further question in terms of what the motion contains? Question on what the motion contains?
No.
Okay. Question on what the motion contains?
Yes. Gordon Price, 48 Manlot Road.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, clarification. If this article were to pass, would it prevent the pending construction of the senior center? Would that halt the senior center construction project?
I'll let someone who's involved in this respond. Is there someone who wants to respond to that? I would point out this is a petition to submit legislation to the state legislature, so it has no effect until it is submitted to the legislature, and then depends on what happens at the State House.
Well, Mr. Moderator, I guess the question is, if the legislature should approve this, would that have bearing on the construction of a senior center that this town has spent well over $1 million getting it to the point that it's at now?
Okay, I would ask if any one of our town administrators can answer that question.
It might. It's not clear because the definition of what a senior center is underneath this is not clear. However, it does specify that a permit was issued for the senior center prior to the passage of the legislation. It would be okay. If the permit is not issued when this is enacted by the legislature, I honestly don't know, Gordon, I couldn't tell you, because the senior center is a different cat than what's in here. So I would say no, it doesn't impact it, but someone else could have a different interpretation than I would.
Okay, thank you.
Gentleman at the center mic.
My name's Jerry Kelly. I'm at 56 Moorland Road. My initial question was Dr. Price's, because this seems to preclude the construction of governmental buildings or multifamily buildings. And I guess I would ask town council is this legal?
Board of Selectmen is in charge of town council. Should we get an answer to that?
I don't
Okay,
know.
town council?
No, the Board of Selectmen.
Jerry, I'll take a stab at it. This came up in a similar vein last year. It was determined that it was not legal because it discriminated against types of property. However, this is a special act of the legislature, so if it passes, it would make it legal, if that makes sense. So we are legalizing this through the legislature. So unless the Attorney General stepped in and said, no, you can't do it, it would be allowed.
Thank you.
Ms. Canfield?
All right, John, we got a problem. We'll just do this. I just want to note that having not seen this amendment prior to tonight, I wanted to just note that adding the language that the petitioner has added changes substantially what we were here to address. And that this particular amendment, as I see it, and I'm sure the planning board could opine on this as well, makes it more of a zoning issue than a water moratorium issue. And I would like the opportunity to address the whole concept of a moratorium and update everyone on where we are on water planning, but I think that this particular language is a whole different animal, and I just wanted to note that.
Okay, the petitioner has had a chance to present his motion. We'll now allow the petitioner to have some part of the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Okay. So, I feel a little bit like the scientists who stood up and said, global warming, and then we had the coldest darn year in the world the next year, and everybody said, what? All right, so it's not the same, but I was trying to be a little bit light, a little bit of humor. Can you hear me okay? Sorry, thank you. Okay, so hear me out on this a little bit. We have our water infrastructure is broken. We continue to have brown water. We have water mains breaking all over the place. Our water treatment plant's on life support. And we have a limited supply of water, and yet we continue to add a large number of water consumers. And today we have a historic opportunity. Our town has engaged an expert water engineering firm to study our water system and advise us on the risks that we face and the opportunities for improvement. And I'll give you a hint. The town did a similar study in 2003, and the conclusions included a strong warning that the town faced water shortages if development continued unabated and critical infrastructure needed repair. 16 years ago. Some of that work has been done, especially the partial water main replacement. I'm sure the town will tell you about all the things that they're doing, and it's great. And I'm not against any of the things that they're doing, and I want to interject. I think the Board of Selectmen are great people. They work hard. I think the town water department people are great people. They work hard, and they're doing a great job. But we have a problem. We went into full outdoor water ban 3 of the last 6 years. It's hard to say we don't have a water problem when you're going into a full outdoor water ban, and it's affecting us all. We recently approved a lot of additional residents, and they're not yet living here, so we don't really feel the impact of it, but they will. They're coming. In the 10 years prior to this past year or so, the town had almost no growth. But the Toll Brothers and the MBTA project, that's like another 1,000 residents. It's going to be significant. And there's much more in the queue that's coming down the pike. And we need to take advantage of the opportunity to slow it down. Today, the town of Scituate believes that they must approve the next project that requests water because of a state number that was published. And we need to challenge that. It's an annual average number, and we're not an average town. Our population doubles or increases by some high percentage. Who knows what it is? In the summer, our water consumption certainly goes way up. So we don't fit into nice, normal, average number systems. And we already know that we run into the water shortages. It doesn't make sense. It's time to fix it. But adding new consumers is a one-way door. Once you invite them into town, and then if you have a water problem later, you can't say, oh, just kidding, would you mind moving back out? Like, it's a one-way door. And we need to take the moment now to say, let's be careful, let's think about this. We need to hit the pause button. Let's let the engineers finish their study, tell us about our risks and opportunities, and then we can formulate a plan and move forward.
Thank you. Gentleman on my left.
Scott Greenbaum, 40 Damon Road. My question is, why do we have to go to the legislature? Please explain the process, because I'm not sure why we have to go to the legislature and not just pass our own town ordinance. So that's my question.
Okay. And it's a really good question, and I'm not a legal expert, and I did have legal experts helping me with this, but I'll do my best on this. You've seen that there's two articles on the warrant. One is a bylaw amendment that doesn't require us to go to the legislature. And in that bylaw, if I were to insert language in that bylaw that said that we would exempt single-family residences and businesses that don't really consume much water, then we would be illegal again, because we already went down that road in April. And so I'd be wasting people's time, but the real goal is to stop the large developments that are going to significantly impact the consumption of water in town. These are estimates, these are engineers trying to come up with ideas about how much water can we really use, and it's going to be approximate. And right now, we don't really have an approximate. And so it's a boundary condition. The benefit of the legislature is that they can say it's legal.
Further discussion. Lady on my right-hand side.
Lisa Bertola, 52 Elm Street, Scituate. I first want to start with a few comments. I want to applaud the petitioner for taking the effort to get the signatures and petition and exercise your right to raise this and put it in the spotlight. It takes a lot of effort, and if we had more citizens committed like you, we would be a better town. So kudos to you for getting this in the spotlight. I don't necessarily agree with all of what's been written and what's been proposed, but I do have a question about the language in the proposal. It's previously been clarified that large projects would have to wait for a new connection, or this would affect them. One large project that's currently underway in the town that was told to find their own water, my understanding is they're not finding water, and if that particular project were to come to the town and request a connection, would that be denied under this proposed moratorium? And what is the length of this moratorium? Is it just a year?
1 year.
1 year. And I'm interested why there was such a close vote on the advisory council on this. With this proposed amended language, would there be a change in that vote? This is just a pause on granting connections. It's only a 12-month moratorium. I don't understand why there would be a large objection if this proposed amendment language were included by the advisory council. This is more than just an issue of development. It's an issue of putting our natural resources before enterprise, free enterprise, at the scale that certain projects are at in this town. And again, kudos to the petitioner, and I'd love some clarification on whether or not Toll Brothers could come and ask for a hookup and get it during that moratorium based on the proposed amended changes. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we had Ms. Canfield. Mr. Wright, do you want to address the question on the advisory committee? Let's do that first. Karen, you.
So I'm here to address the question on the divided vote from the advisory committee. And we were conflicted between economic development, free enterprise, and improving and preserving our water. We voted 4 against the amendment and 3 for it. We were not provided this language in advance of tonight's meeting, so we were not able to contemplate the impact that that would have, and that is excluding single-family homes and commercial buildings and restricting multifamily. We didn't have that information to contemplate, so I guess we don't have an opinion on that.
Thank you. Selectman Canfield. No, yep, it's someone else's turn at this point. Selectman Canfield?
Toll Brothers, I'm sorry. Sorry, Lisa, I didn't understand what development you were talking about. If you were referring to the Toll Brothers project, that's already been permitted, so this would not apply. Is that accurate? Oh, if another one came up. Well, honestly, we're a little thrown for a loop. I would assume that if another one came along in a one-year moratorium, it wouldn't, I actually will address that in my comments, but it wouldn't apply, it would apply, but as we all know, most of those kinds of projects take more than a year to permit. So I don't think it would, honestly, in my opinion, it wouldn't, and this is my opinion, for a large project like that, this moratorium will have no impact because they'll just go through the permitting process and the moratorium will be over in a year. So that, I hope that answers that question. I did want to provide...
I was calling on you to give you a chance to state the position of the Board of Selectmen.
The board would like to make some statements about the original petition, which was for a moratorium. As the advisory said, my comments will not reflect the changed language because it wasn't anticipated, and quite frankly, we don't have time to, haven't had time to absorb that. But I think that an update will be useful, might hopefully address some of the questions that Mrs. Pritchard brought up earlier tonight. So if you will indulge a little bit, I'll try to be brief, but I would like to address the original moratorium request for Articles 12 and 13. And I would thank you, Mr. Moderator, for this time. The Board of Selectmen does appreciate the concerns of the petitioner and thanks him for his work on this effort. We understand about the problems facing our infrastructure, and we share his desire to ensure the town does all it can to protect public health, safety, and environment. We do not, however, agree that a moratorium will address any of the petitioner's concerns. I'd like to explain a little bit about this, and I will, as I said, try to be brief. The petition states there are 3 problems that the moratorium will help address: brown water, needed infrastructure upgrades, deficiency in quantity and quality of our water. As we all know, brown water is caused by many factors, but only one of which the moratorium could conceivably address. The argument that adding new homes will dramatically stir up flow and stir up sediment just doesn't bear out. Since 2000, Scituate has added an average of 27 new homes a year. The increase of 27 new homes to the system is about 5,000 gallons per day. That's less than 0.5% of increase in flow. It is simply not enough to stir up the system. The second stated problem is the need for water system infrastructure upgrades. A moratorium does absolutely nothing to address this problem. In fact, if the historic averages of 27 homes don't get permitted in 2020, the town would lose $378,000 in water hookup fees, which would otherwise be used to address infrastructure problems. I also want to point out that the hookup fees were dramatically increased this year from $6,500 to $14,000 to help fund these vital improvements, but also as a planning tool, which will help us tap the brakes on the very development that the petitioner has raised concerns about. The final problem, and to Lisa's point, that would mean a larger development would have to pay a substantially higher amount to come into our town. The final problem stated in the petitions is the time that it will need to rectify the deficiencies in quality and quantity of our public water supply. Again, a moratorium is not the right tool to address the concern, and quite frankly, doesn't recognize that both quality and quality analysis and remediations are already underway. Historically, the town's biggest quality issues have been manganese in the pipes, the existence of extremely old pipes, and decades of sediment buildup in the system. We've all heard this, you all know this. Since 2009, the town has invested over $25 million. And if you haven't heard it now, I'd like to let everyone know they have according to our esteemed water department, we've eliminated manganese sources from coming into the system. We've replaced, as had been already noted, 26.7 miles of cast iron pipes and other old pipes. And since those fragile pipes have been removed, the town has been aggressively cleaning the pipes with ice pigging, which is my favorite term, flushing programs, and other methods to remove sediment. Projected capital expenditures for the next 5 years are already including $8.7 million in continued water main replacements, $600,000 for ice pigging, $8 million for sand filter to improve quality of water on a very high producing well, and $40 million that we'll need for a new water treatment plant. It's important to note that we are already conducting a system-wide study that will analyze both the impact of these works and the proposed measures and provide recommendations for future planning. This report will be finalized in January. It is the most important tool for determining ways to rectify deficiencies, as stated in the petition, and it's about to be finished. A one-year moratorium will do nothing to expedite this process, and in fact, could create additional problems that I'll discuss in just a minute. Promise in just a minute. On the quantity issue, since 2009, the town's total water usage, and I just learned this from our experts recently, our water usage since 2009 has actually declined by 2.4% every year. And that is as our population has grown by 500 people and we've added about 200 homes. This reflects the positive impact of newer efficient building codes since the 2003 study that John referenced, conservation restrictions and education, and system upgrades. In addition, in 2016, our water withdrawal permit was increased since that time, to another 70,000 gallons a day. While the water study will dig deeper into the numbers to verify the current conditions, even simple math indicates that there are many years of capacity within our current withdrawal permit and projected growth. What the simple math does not factor in, the multiple projects already underway to expand our capacity, including raising the reservoir, bringing new wells online, reducing leaks in our pipe replacement program, and aggressive conservation measures. Finally, the board could not support the moratorium petitions, not only because they don't address the problems they cite, but because they will create additional problems for our residents. A large development will not be deterred by a one-year moratorium because of the time it takes to permit, as I already mentioned. And as most of the planning board knows, it's unlikely that any 40B development would be applicable under this moratorium. Who will it impact? Residents who have double lots, who may want to sell off for their own financial needs or to have a friend live next door. It'll impact new businesses who might be thinking twice about developing commercial land in our recently redesigned overlay districts. It would mean no accessory dwelling permits. Obviously, these comments were written before the amendment, so.
Excuse me, 30 seconds.
What?
You have 30
30
seconds.
seconds? All right. All right, I just want to conclude that we received a letter from the Department of Environmental Protection recently to our water superintendent that noted they were discussing of a resolution to a problem. And the DEP official wrote in the letter, and I want to quote, "I also applaud the entire Scituate Department of Public Works for your work this year to overcome serious challenges with your water system. Although many of your customers are still frustrated, you are taking the proper managerial, financial, and planning steps necessary to repair your aged infrastructure. And the board is very proud of the town's efforts to address these concerns and voted unanimously not to support this motion."
Thank you. Lady at the center mic.
Andrea Hunt, 66 Manlot Road. I'd like a couple of questions to Mr. Baumke. First of all,
Ms. Hunt, I'd ask you to state all of your questions, and then we'll get an answer on all of them from the petitioner, please.
The first question would be on what Ms. Canfield just read to us. My understanding is that this new wording would take care of the issue that she spoke about with restrictions on people building on their own private lots. So, is that correct?
No.
And would our town still be able to build single homes?
That's question one.
That's question one. Question two is there's been a lot of talk about the legalities of the wording and of the petition. And I know when you came before us at the town meeting last April, it was deemed at that time that there was legal issues with it, and you were going to rework that. Have you, in fact, had people helping you that are in the legal field that know how to do this wording, and have you had lawyers helping you with putting this together so that the wording is correct and can go to a legislature without being just automatically dismissed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll ask if you could respond to those two questions, please.
Yes, so I'll take the second question first because I think it helps the first. And yes, I have had legal help from a gentleman who has legal experience and also significant experience with town legislations and how to run towns. And we believe that there is not a legal issue. There won't be a legal issue with the wording of this, and that yes, in fact, the new wording will make it so that people can build on their own private lots and can build single-family homes in town.
Thank you.
Gentleman to my left.
Andrew Boyle, 36 Station Street. I think this, more than anything, is the most frustrating part of local governance. We have what appears to be a very simple issue, very simple problem that very few people argue with, that there is a lack of water capacity in the town. There's numerous documented instances of poor water quality, and just an overall sense that this problem exists. What we also have is an attempt to rectify that in a way that seems very simple, is to say, well, let's limit the amount of new water hookups, which would then supposedly solve this problem. We've had a lot of, I hate to say nitpicking, but we've had a lot of detail-oriented work on this. And as an attorney myself, I completely understand the need for that. I think overall we need to take a hard look at anything we do to see what the ramifications are going to be on the town and the community as a whole. But I think the point in all of this that we're missing is the blue sky issue, is the fact that there is a frustration in our community amongst almost everybody, and a lack of leadership on how to solve that problem. We've nibbled around the edges on this. We've taken little pieces here and there, but I think overall this petition wouldn't exist if there was a clear-cut plan and solution to thoroughly address this problem in a way that makes sense to people and can be explained to people. And again, this is not a simple issue. It is a complex issue, but I think the town in general is owed a duty from leadership, from everybody involved on the town level, to say, we understand, we know this is a concern. These are the steps, the enumerated steps that we're going to take to fix it. And secondly, I would point out that Scituate as a community exists, as we said, in two parts, in sort of a summer part and in a winter part. And I think we all get that, and I think that point is not lost on folks. But it's important to realize that the people who live here and who are a part of this community have an investment here that goes beyond, just owning a house or just having to sort of come and go. We're all looking to say, what is Scituate going to be? Like, at what point do we say overdevelopment is an issue, not just because the nuts and the bolts of it don't work the way we think they're going to, or it's going to add this capacity or that number? At what point do we say, we don't want this to be a 40,000 person community? At what point do we say, we want Scituate to be X and we should plan towards that? And I think that's the part that's missing in this entire discussion. I think we're getting lost in the weeds on a lot of this issue. So whether you support this moratorium or not, I would encourage everybody to think about that and to put that in your mind, is what do we want this town to look like, and how do we get there? And let's focus more on that than the, well, we don't think this particular part of this particular section is going to work for, whatever reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman at the center mic.
Good evening. This is Steve Pritchard, 36 Meeting House Lane. I'm a member of the Planning Board, and although the Planning Board has been mentioned here a number of times, we didn't get these warrant articles to look at initially, but the Planning Board did talk about this and wanted to make at least a general statement about the objectives here. So if you'll bear with me, I just have a statement that the board has voted on and wanted to make sure we shared it with the town. The Planning Board is charged by both state and local law to, among other things, develop and deliver the town's 20-year master plan. An integral part of that plan is striking a balance between development and the sustainability of our natural resources, of course, water supply being such a foundational natural resource. The board has reviewed the objectives of the proposed warrants, specifically the objective to protect public health, safety, and the environment, and to protect the integrity of the town's water supply. This is a broad objective, but one that in many ways the town has emphasized in its laws and in its long-range planning. For example, the town's zoning bylaws state that a fundamental purpose of the bylaws are to conserve natural resources and to encourage the most appropriate use of land. Pretty broad. Further, in our current master plan, which was published 15 years ago, as I believe Mr. Bemke pointed out, it was very clear on our water challenges, specifically stating that the town should determine the safe physical yield of its water supply and must continue and strengthen efforts to conserve water while planning for expansion of the supply in order to have water to meet the needs of new businesses and residential development. The town may need to consider growth control measures to ensure that the pace of development does not outstrip the town's ability to provide water or even any other basic needs. The master plan went on to say the town's water supply is not unlimited. Scituate, like many other towns on the South Shore, needs to carefully assess the ability of its water supply to support additional development and plan accordingly. And that long-term planning for municipal water services should include controls on growth, if necessary, and increased public education about the necessity for water conservation. That was 15 years ago. Here we are 15 years later, still struggling with the same set of issues and still waiting on a thorough assessment of our system. We've made some progress, and it's been talked about here, but we have much to do, and it's time that we do it. The Planning Board is supportive of the objective to study the town's system-wide capacity issues and to determine whether and upon what terms and conditions increases in flow are prudent while preserving our water resources in a long-term, sustainable way. We have consistently supported the effort for a comprehensive water system study that gets to the heart of our sustainable long-term system capacity and develops clear methodologies to support the assessment of new growth within such a sustainable framework. We believe the water study, along with its recommendations, should be finished first. After it is complete, the town can then move forward and decide what is in the best interest of the entire town. That was the Planning Board's statement on this. I have a couple of additional comments, if I may.
Got a little less than a minute and a half.
Thank you. The Planning Board, and as a member of the Planning Board, we've faced this frustration development after development after development. The simple math that has been talked about here is not simple. It's just strictly not a simple analysis. It's what drove us and drove approval of some of these ongoing developments, but it was a frustration of the Planning Board that there wasn't more careful and a more specifically analyzed solution on water supply. And as we've gone through this, one of the things I just heard somebody say is that, you know, we can wait a year, and if somebody's permitting new multifamily development, well, in a year it'll be okay. That's not the objective, I think, of the study. The objective of the study is to evaluate what we have, develop a methodology and an approach that allows us to carefully assess new development. And this gentleman over here, forget his name, was spot on. Our role, and when we look at it from a planning point of view, our role is to say, how do we sustain this year after year, and how do we make a real-time, in-the-moment decision
Your time is
about approving
I'm sorry,
a development, one more, about approving a development without some kind of framework to do that on. And we haven't been able to do that. And
Thank you.
we
Thank you.
support the development of
Thank
this
you.
study.
Town Administrator.
I just wanted to address one point that Mr. Boyle made when he said we need to decide what Scituate is going to look like and what we want Scituate to be in the next 40 years. That is not an issue of a water moratorium. That is an issue of zoning. And right now, you have the opportunity to have input on that because we are going through a master plan process right now where the town is looking at what you want your town to look like over the next 15, 20 years. The water moratorium achieves none of that. It stops things for a year, and then you're right back on the same track you're on now.
I recognize.
So if you want to decide what Scituate should look like, what your town should look like, you need to be involved in the master plan and the planning process, because that is a zoning issue, not a water use issue. As Mr. Pritchard pointed out, we are doing a water study right now. The last water study was 2001. We are working off that plan because no one worked off it. Since 2003, the town has spent or approved over $46 million in water projects. We have done, 70% of the town has now had their water pipes flushed for the first time in decades, not years, in decades, to clean those pipes. We've replaced 22 miles of pipes. We're doing another 3 miles of the worst pipes this year that impact those individual neighborhoods. We're putting in flushing gates. We're putting in hydrants. We're doing ice pigging, and we're going to replace pipes on a regular basis. We have a plan. We are following it, and we are updating it. This is going to sound weird coming from me, but a water ban is a blunt instrument. I'm a blunt person, but this is not how you achieve your goals. You achieve your goals through planning and through a process. This will not help brown water one bit. If I do not build another home, apartment, business in Scituate and do nothing else, brown water will stay. To deal with the brown water, we must keep doing what we're doing with flushing and pipe replacement and well rehabilitation. Putting on a moratorium, not putting on a water moratorium has absolutely nothing to do, or does nothing to change the water that is coming into your house. Last year, the town approved an assistant water superintendent, a guy by the name of Mike Cloud. A lot of you have probably met him. When you call about brown water, he comes out to your house, and he meets with you. And he has been out almost every single day with his crew since he started chasing down and working on brown water. You've seen the pictures we put up of what we're getting out of the pipes. It's bad. It's bad. But we're getting it out. We're doing the work, and we are really hopeful and believe we will see a real improvement in water quality in Scituate in the spring. And we're going to test that beforehand. We have a process that we're going to do before the water usage goes up to see if we're making progress on that. So if you want to decide how the town's supposed to look, that's a zoning issue. If you're worried about how fast the town's growing, According to the U.S. Census Bureau, since 1970, the population of Scituate has increased less than 2,000 people. In 48 years, less than 2,000 people. That's the explosive growth that we're talking about. We have the water, we're developing the water, and we're fixing the system. Let us continue to do our job and hold us accountable if we don't do it. If you don't think that water is my issue, I have bottles of brown water on my desk. Every single day I look at them. Every single day I'm talking to Kevin. Where are we? What are we flushing? Where are we pigging? What are we doing? Mrs. Smith calls, send someone down to her house, find out what's going on, flush her line, pull her meter.
30 seconds.
So I ask you just to let us continue what we're doing. This, if passed, could be legal. My only caveat to that is if it passes, it'd still be open to someone challenging it as to whether or not it would still be legal. So it could be challenged even if it passes.
Thank you. Lady to my left.
Me.
Yes.
Yep, Patrice Metro, 223 Clap Road, Scituate. I was up there talking on the advisory council, and I just want to say that as a member of the advisory committee, I did vote against this. As an individual, I understand I want clean water in July and August and last week. But these are complicated issues. I guess I wanted to ask if it's appropriate for me to ask the water department if there is anything else that they would have to say about the negative impact of a possible moratorium.
Someone want to respond to that?
The other potential impact would not only be on the water budget, where we would have less water revenue coming in, and we would either have to cut back what we're doing or increase water fees, but you would also see a reduction in the town's growth figure, which is what we use to build the town budget. So we could see a reduction in revenue going into the town budget, which would lead to either less services or a reduction of services. So there are budgetary impacts that could happen if the moratorium passes.
Okay, and what about any of the other work that's planned over the next year already?
Well, again, the moratorium wouldn't stop that work, but if we're not bringing in connection fees at the level that we budgeted, we would then have to raise water rates to make up for that difference in order to pay for that work.
Okay, thank you.
Lady to the right.
Great. So Kathleen Cerruti, 65 Brook Street. So I think the current overdevelopment of our town is both a master plan issue and a water usage issue. And I think some of the problematic decisions that have already been made have altered the landscape of our town forever. So unfortunately, I do have some nuts and bolts question for Ms. Canfield. I just need a little bit more information on the Toll Brother development. You said it won't affect it because it's already permitted. I'm a little confused. Are they already permitted to connect up to our water supply? Because I thought that they were supposed to find their own water. No. So if that's not true, then I'm misinformed. They're already permitted to connect up to our water supply, and you don't see that as being problematic. You said it won't stir up anything because it's not that big of a development. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Excuse me. Are there other questions that you have for Ms. Canfield?
No, well, we'll go with those.
No, I'd like to get all the questions. I don't want to back and forth.
Yep.
Okay. Could I have any other questions you have?
You got them all.
That's good. Ms. Canfield.
Thank you. That's a good question. So when I was talking about the 27 homes, that's been our past average. So, and I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, the Toll Brother project, it is already has its building permit. It is fully entitled to hook up to water. Tonight, honestly, is the first time I heard that there was ever a discussion of that not happening. I don't know where they would build a well, but in any case, they are proposed to build around 150 townhouses. The current build-out is 3 to 4 years. So the math on that, I think, ends up to be, I think they, if I did it right, it's like 5,000 gallons a year as they build out. So I'm sure the water department will correct me, but given the we have 1.2 million of circulation every year, it's not anticipated that even that development, which is of course larger than anything we've ever seen, would would stir up the flow. The good news, as the town administrator mentioned, is they will be paying their hookup fees and they'll be increasing property values, which will support a lot of the things we need to do. So the project has been approved, it is happening, but it shouldn't impact the brown water, but will provide additional funds to actually address some of our infrastructure problems.
Gentleman to my left.
Oh, here. Yes.
Yes.
My name is Anthony Antonello, and I live at 34 Marin Road Extension, Scituate. I was also the DPW director for the town of Scituate from 1975 to 2008, and then a member of the advisory board from 2008 until this year. I am a registered professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and I just can't see any reason why we can't have a connection moratorium. I know that the DPW is working very hard in solving these issues, but what's wrong with the moratorium? No more connections until we resolve these issues. I know that Mr. Cafferty and the Water Division are working very hard to resolve these issues, but why can't we just have a moratorium? I think that would speak very highly of the town. We have a problem. Let's not have any new connections until we resolve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Second gentleman on my left.
Mark D'Onofrio, 743 Country Way. Also here speaking on behalf of the Scituate Chamber of Commerce, of which I'm the current chair. We are, the chair of Chamber of Commerce, came here to say we are opposed to this this bylaw, this article and the other article addressing the moratorium. We are very concerned about the negative impact it would have on potential commercial development here in town. We certainly don't want to discourage commercial development, and while the language introduced today changes that somewhat, I'm still concerned about the lack of clarity and definition for what kind of businesses would or would not be included or excluded. There are some commercial enterprises which require a significant amount of water use, restaurants, of course, being one of them. The other issue we are concerned about is the potential impact on economic development in our mixed-use developments in our overlay districts, and were mentioned earlier. This town is in desperate need of workforce housing. It's all well and fine to say a single-family house can hook up, but we need multifamily housing. We need affordable housing for our workforce-type housing, people who can actually not afford to live here anymore, and we certainly want to encourage that going forward. So I'd be concerned about the negative impact it would have on folks putting forward mixed-use development projects in the near future.
Thank you. Lady in the center.
Yeah, hi, this is Steve Pritchard again.
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Pritchard.
Yep.
The rules have to let everybody else speak before you can come back a second time.
Okay. I thought we were recognized.
The lady in the center.
Go ahead.
Ann Burbine, 10 Pennycrest Road. I move the question.
I have a motion to move the question. It's not debatable. Do we have a second? Do we have a second on the motion to move the question? We have a second? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Let's do that one more time. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed?
No.
I declare it a 2/3 vote. If 7 people stand, we'll do a count. All right, that brings us to the main motion. This requires a majority vote. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Let's have a show of hands. I'm just going to get a show of hands first. I might be able to follow it. All those in favor, please raise their hands, their cards. We're not counting at this point. I'm going to see if I can. All right, thank you. You can put your cards down. Those opposed? I think the nays have it, but we're going to do a count. Yeah, if we could have the tellers take your stations, please. Motion, please raise your voting card. Okay, where do we want to start? Now we got our right and left problem, huh? Hmm? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to start with the right. No, we have to count the yeses and then we do the noes. So we're going to take the right rear bleacher.
13.
Right front bleacher.
11, 1, 1.
Right rear floor.
12, 1, 2.
Right center floor.
21, 2, 1.
Right front floor, including the advisory committee and school committee. Left, right bleacher.
14.
Say again. 2-0. 1, 4. Thank you. Left front bleachers.
1.
Left rear floor. Left center floor.
10, 1, 0.
Left front floor, including the moderator, clerk, selectmen, and registrars. Now we will take account of those voting no. Those who are opposed to the motion, raise your voting card, please. Makes sense. Okay. Right rear bleacher.
19.
19. Right front bleacher.
6.
6. Right rear floor.
15, 1, 5.
1, 5. Right center floor.
6.
6. Right front floor, including the advisory committee and school committee. 23. Left rear bleachers.
16.
1, 5.
1, 6.
1, 6. Okay. Left front bleacher.
2.
2. Left rear floor. 1, 4. 14. Left center floor.
4. 4.
Left front floor, including moderator, clerk, selectmen, and registrars. 1, 7. We have, the vote is 110 in favor, 122 opposed, requires a majority, does not receive it, the vote fails. We now are back to Article 12.
If the people who are leaving could just let us know which way you voted, that'd be great. Just kidding.
We have a motion on Article 12, which is the proposal for a new bylaw, including a moratorium.
Fighting with this again, I'll just take it out. Thank you. I move that the town of Scituate amend the town bylaws by adding a new section. This is a revision 32080. Water moratorium as follows, or take any other action thereto. Whereas the purpose of this bylaw is to protect public health, safety, and the environment, and protect the integrity of the town of Scituate's public water supply systems by providing new connections, systems expansions, and increases in flow for a temporary period of time to allow the town to study system-wide capacity issues and to determine whether and upon what terms and conditions such increases in flow may be permitted in the future. This includes, but is not limited to, the following reasons set forth in Section 2. Whereas the residents of Scituate have suffered from brown water on a consistent and unremitting basis, whereas both the water systems require infrastructure upgrades, time is needed to rectify the deficiencies in the quantity and quality of the public water supply. Now, therefore, the town adopts this bylaw. Water system connection and extension moratorium for a period of 1 year from the effective date by this bylaw. The town shall not approve any application for any new connection to the town's public water supply system, for extension of the town's water supply system, or for increases in flow from existing public water supply system connections or extensions. Notwithstanding the foregoing sentence and subject to compliance with the requirements of the town's water connection regulations and other applicable laws, the Board of Selectmen or its designee may approve water connection applications for properties the building permits for which were issued approved prior to the effective date by this bylaw, providing that such building permits have not lapsed, and for properties that with on-well sites, if the Board of Health orders the property owner to abandon the well and connect to the public water supply. Requests for water connections pursuant to this paragraph will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis and may be denied if it is determined that there is insufficient system availability to accommodate the requested connection, or for any other reason set forth in the town's water connection regulation or any other applicable law. Not severable, invalidity of the section, provision, paragraph, sentence, and clause by this bylaw shall not invalidate any other section.
Thank you. Is there a second? Is there a second? I'll ask the proponent to give a brief statement of his position.
Yes. Yes. So I've kind of given the positive reasons, and we've heard some of the negative, some of the objections, and perhaps I'll take a moment to address some of the objections. You've heard people object to this on the possibility that there will be budget issues. You know, we're middle of a budget season, and we have a huge pipeline with the Toll Brothers and other properties coming through. I've spoken with people. I think it's very unlikely in the current budget period that there would be any budget impact. We've talked about, I've heard people in writing in the paper talk about possible impact on real estate value. Well, maybe, but what I think about the property value, I think about house and home. A gentleman talked about the community that we want to have, but really, isn't it things like a nice place where you want to live with your family, and good schools, and a healthy community, and oh, by the way, clean, plentiful water. Like that's a home, right? In terms of a house, well, I mean, when I went to college and studied economics, they talked about this thing, supply and demand. I don't know, it may not work anymore, but it seems to me that if you have a moratorium, then you constrain the supply of houses, demand will continue, and that's going to be good for property owners. So I don't see in any way that this is bad for property owners. I think it's good. We'll have better water, and we'll probably get price increase out of it, but it's certainly not going down, right? And in terms of the business development, I think that is a risk of this version of the moratorium, and I agree, but I think the need to complete the water study and to know what water we have available is important, and that we should amend the bylaw, and then if the water study is miraculously completed, then when we get to April, we can rescind the bylaw if it turns out we have plenty of water, so it doesn't even have to be a year.
Thank you. Further discussion? Selectman Canfield.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I won't reiterate everything, obviously, I just said, but there are a couple of points that now that this bylaw or this amendment article is put out as a full moratorium, I think Mr. D'Onofrio touched on it. Another area that will be deeply impacted in this community in particular is our local builders and all those who work for them. If they are not able to draw a permit for the next year, then they will have hard time sustaining their small businesses and in those that they employ in our town. We did talk about the commercial development impact that, as Mr. D'Onofrio mentioned, there is a great need for affordable housing, and that those projects would also come to a halt if we have a full moratorium. The petitioner has mentioned that maybe we'll spike in value because of supply and demand, but we don't know that because in some towns where a moratorium has taken place, property values declined because of perceived problems in the town, and why would you come here? We don't know which way it would go. It's a 1 year. It may not have an impact. We don't know, but there are consequences to the people that already have homes in this town. And as far as the budget impact goes, obviously fiscal 20 is well underway. If a moratorium went into place tomorrow, what we would be seeing is the impact in our fiscal 21 budget, and we would certainly, as noted by our assessor at one point this week, we had 23 homes, I believe, last year built, which resulted in revenue to this town of $266,000. That would clearly go away should a moratorium for the next, for any homes that would be developed. There would be no revenue growth, and as our town administrator pointed out, that would indeed translate into some adjustments needed on the services we could provide to the town.
Thank you. Further discussion? We need to hear from the advisory committee.
Okay, I don't really have anything to add to what we said before, except that now that this is back, this bylaw, or this whatever it's called, article hasn't been changed, so it's a full moratorium without the exceptions that were included in Article 13. So I would just state again that the advisory committee voted not to approve it for the reasons that I said before. There are financial issues, the efforts that are already going by, efforts by the town to solve the problems we think should carry on, the impact on local builders, which has been talked about again, and the potential legal contention of some of these issues. Okay?
Thank you. Lady to my left.
Kathy Donahue, Cushing Landing. A question for Mrs. Canfield through you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
She had mentioned that the average building number per year has been 27 homes per year. I know last year the village of Greenbush came on, and of course that's all rental, so it's a single access. The Herringbrook Meadow project, the 40B on 3A, that was going to be 60 condos, but now it's 60 apartments, so that's going to be one connection again. The Toll Brothers was mentioned, and then of course we have the MBTA station. I believe that's 70 units of rental. Do the Board of Selectmen, as water commissioners, feel that there's enough capacity to handle Toll Brothers, the Greenbush MBTA station, 70 units, the Herringbrook Meadow, 60 units, the Stockbridge Road, 90 units? Is there enough water capacity in our town that we can handle this massive increase in water demand by mainly one access rental units, rental complexes, as opposed to the anticipated condo individual unit tie-up fees that were thought to be. Now that they're rentals, they don't, that money isn't coming in that way. Money and water supply. Thank you.
Ms. Canfield to respond to the question. With assistance from the town administrator. Go ahead.
So the short answer is yes. The long answer is technical, and I'm definitely going to defer to the experts in this field on this. Oh, it's not you? I was going to get shot.
I'm not the expert, but I'll just elaborate on Karen's answer. Not only do we feel that we have enough water currently, but we'll be bringing 2 additional sources online in the near future. Well 17A, which is off Tac Factory, we're putting a green sand filter on. That's at about 20% capacity. We anticipate that'll bring in over 200,000 gallons a day when fully utilized. The Dolan well fields are being permitted now. They'll be in excess of 300,000 gallons when they're brought on board. So right now we have the capacity, and we're not sure when those are going to go online and how they're going to go online, but we believe we have the capacity right now to handle those.
Thank you. Could I ask one question of the town administrator? Have we budgeted for the expense of those wells coming on?
Well 17A, yes, that's done. Well, the Dolan well fields, we're in the permitting process and the development process, so that's been budgeted, but to actually put the wells in, we haven't got to that point yet.
So we will need to spend more money for that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The lady to my right.
Yes, Lisa Bertola, 52 Elm Street, Scituate. I just want to again commend the petitioner for bringing this to the spotlight. I want to clarify that the work of the town currently on the water issue is very commendable, and no one here, I think, disputes the efforts of the town currently on this issue. What I think the elephant in the room is about this whole debate and this whole discussion is that the developers themselves, the developers who come in with these projects, if they had been asked years ago to contribute in some way, whether through fees or through smart zoning, adhering to different zoning or requirements of the town, perhaps they would have contributed into the infrastructure to make this water issue go, not exist today. So there's an unfair burden on the current officials, the current town administration, to deal with this issue that was a backlog of neglect. And by raising this petition, I just think it's highlighting the elephant in the room, which is, and there's a lot of special interests here talking about making sure their projects get through, and they're worried about water hookups for their own, commercial growth or a particular project in the town. The issue is natural resources, and our protection of those resources has been long neglected. And it's an unfair burden on us as voters, residents, and officials to deal with it in a vacuum or all at once. And right now, it's unfair to all of us, and it's making everyone frustrated. So again, kudos to the petitioner for putting this on tonight's agenda, and at the very least, raising the attention and the imperative that we do something about this in a very constructive and collective way. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman on my left.
Yes, James Gilmore, 735 First Parish Road, Scituate. I've been on capital planning previous to my years on the advisory committee. I'll agree with the fine lady on the other side of the room that compliments everybody for what they're doing now. I want to say 2 things. One, anytime you're looking at a moratorium across the country in any environment, that's a reaction from frustration, and we can all sympathize with where that frustration has occurred, but it's also punitive, it's draconian, it's regressive, and it really doesn't do anything except kind of slow up the program to fix what we're all desirous of fixing. I can remember when I was first on Capitol, we had no plans. We'd sit in the room, in the selectmen's room, and we'd turn to our then town administrator and say, do we have the money for this? and he'd open an envelope in his pocket and do some numbers, and he'd say, yeah, let's go that way, and let's improve this, improve that. Since that time, we have 5-year plans, we have 10-year plans, we have 20-year plans. Since that time, our fiscal house is in order. And I know this group and the previous selectmen have been working very hard every year to address this situation. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Will we still see some brown water? Absolutely. But let's not throw the baby out with the brown water, who's finally doing some things to fix this. And a moratorium, economically draconian, punitive, out of frustration, things we try not to do in our own behaviors with our families, with our friends, with our business affiliates. Let's not do this to our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman in the center.
Bernie Westerveld, Harborview Road. I'm kind of confused. In the previous article, or was it the next article, Article 13, we heard that the people in Scituate have, since 2009, used less water, 2% a year, 3% a year. Yet the last 3 years we're not allowed, I can't even wash my car anymore. At the same time, the town tells us that we have to grow. That sort of contradicts itself, because we're using less water. Yes, the water restrictions are becoming more intense, and we have to grow. I'm confused.
Thank you. Is there a question?
I heard the explanation on both sides, but they contradict each other. Just making a statement.
You're going to have to reconcile that. I can't help you there. Thank you. Other gentleman in the middle.
Robert Dwyer, 34 Crescent Ave. Just a question on this, because there was some confusion as to whether or not it would be affected under the last article. As this is just a broad moratorium, would this have any effect on the senior center?
Can you respond to that, Mr. Town Administrator?
This is more likely to have an impact on the senior center than the previous one, because the previous one, you would have to wait for the legislature to act. On this one, once the Attorney General said the bylaw was legal, it would go into effect, and I don't think the senior center would have a permit by that. That would be a much faster track than the legislation one. So this one has a better chance of impacting the senior center than the previous one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lady on my right.
Jennifer Kuhn, 20 Cary Litchfield Road. I am so sick of constantly, every time I turn on the water or I do laundry or I'm brushing my teeth, I'm like staring at the water to see what color it is. And I'm just so sick to my stomach that I have to live this way. And I think that we need to approve this article. We need to vote in favor of it in order to just take a pause and make sure we have enough clean water for everyone. I don't think we want a senior center with brown water. I don't think we do. That's not solving any problems. We need to just put a pause on it and pass this. I did want to mention another thing, that the builders, I don't feel that they would be affected, because I think that they could focus on projects that are more renovating, where the water's already hooked up. So they could be renovating those houses or apartments or whatever. As far as new construction with the large projects, I see that a lot of those builders are coming from out of town, and I don't see those are being employed by local builders. So I ask you to vote in favor of this.
Thank you. Gentleman in the middle.
My name is Joe Joyce, 39 Ocean Ave. First, I'd like to ask, the language that was added in the previous one, I think it was Article 13, is that language added in this also?
No, it is not.
Pardon me?
No, it is not.
It is not. Okay.
Motion is as it was presented in the warrant.
As it is written.
Yes.
So, all right, based on what I've heard, I do believe the town is doing a very good job and doing proactive things that need to be done, as has been said today. I happen to be in the construction industry, as this young lady said over here. I do work in renovation. I do believe this is a punitive method
of trying to accomplish something. I too believe we have a problem. Brown water is a problem. It has to be resolved, but not by a moratorium. It's quite simple. It costs us more money to deal with it. We've decided that we'll pay a certain amount of money. We can do a certain amount of repairs or replacements of our pipes. And if we want to replace more, we have to spend more money. We don't need to put a moratorium on future hookups or other people adding to the water. It's punitive to the people who own land in town. Most of those people have no idea we're here tonight making a decision that affects them. A lot of the land in the West End is owned by people. They've had it for a long time. They have no idea that people are here making a decision that would impact them. I think this is the kind of thing that does need attention. I'm for studying, but we don't need to take a year to study. These people are doing that now. People up at Town Hall are researching and have people in doing studies on these things, and we can see it. I can see it. I see it every day because I'm around this town. So I'm voting against this as it is. I'm not against the study. I'm not against dealing with brown water, but I am against doing it this way. I'm against having a moratorium to do a study. We don't need it. We're doing these studies now. We're taking proactive approaches. They're replacing pipes. They replaced 22 miles of it. They're going to replace 2 more miles of it. And if we want to accelerate it, then we have to pay more money. And that's really what it comes down to. Thank you.
Thank you. Lady in the center.
No, I'm not going to move the question. What? Sorry. This moratorium is not in the best interest of the town of Scituate and Burbine, 10 Pennycrest Road. We've already voted no on the last article. We need to vote no on this article as well. I commend the individual for trying, but if you read the warrant article, yes, we have suffered from brown water, but the town is trying really hard to fix it. The water systems require infrastructure upgrades. That's what we're doing, and that's what we're paying for at this point in time. We have suffered in this town, in the almost 50 years that I have lived here, 30 consecutive years of almost malfeasance in terms of the neglect of our infrastructure. And now we are paying the price. We had the lowest water rates around, and now they are gradually going up to pay for the infrastructure that we need. And yes, water is a finite resource that needs to be protected, and we are working very, very hard to do that. So I would strongly urge you to not vote for this article. It is not in anyone's best interest. The town people are doing what they need to do, and they're doing it now. Thank you.
Gentleman on my right.
Gordon Price, 48 Manlot Road. To reply to a previous comment, no, we don't want a senior center with brown water. But voting in this moratorium has the potential to stop what some people in this room want, which is an answer to the B wing at Gates. I spoke with Mr. Corley 3 days ago, who's the CEO of Neighbor Works. Neighbor Works was instrumental in putting together a plan in Marshfield at the old Ventress Library to develop 10 affordable homes for veterans. I spoke to him about our potential project here. He's very much interested in speaking with the town people. I've talked to a couple of selectmen about it. So we have the potential of doing something with the B wing that would benefit veterans, could potentially also benefit affordable housing. To put that on the back burner, either for a year or indefinitely, is not what we really want to do. It's not what I want to do. It's not what a lot of people in this room want to do. To keep Gates the way it is costing us over $100,000 a year for insurance and security and heat and lighting. We need to make a decision on that building. We might have the potential to start that process in the next few months. So I ask that this article be voted down. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman on the left.
My name is Zach Kurland, 17 7th Avenue. I happen to be a relatively new resident who just moved in the end of August. And we were looking around at other neighborhoods, and I lived in downtown Boston for 5 years before that. What I'm hearing from this, and having spoken with other friends that live in this city and have lived in this town for a decade or so, is that this has been a persistent problem, this brown water issue. No one seems to know how or why it has become such a pervasive issue in this town, other than the fact that there's an understanding that the infrastructure is old, that there's been a lot of sediment, there's been a lot of issues with older pipes. And it seems to me that it would make sense, if we don't know the reason why we have brown water in this town, that stopping additional connections, which puts a tax on the system, could be a good idea. Until we know the reason for why we have this issue, taxing the system and putting additional strain on the resources doesn't seem to be a wise use of our options.
Gentleman on my left.
Mike Westnord, 44 Amy's Way. I moved a question.
I have a motion for the previous question, requires a 2/3 vote. It's non-debatable. Do we have a second? Second. Okay. All those in favor of... Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say nay. We're going to do a count.
There's some confusion on that vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I got distracted. All right.
There's some confusion.
All
Some
right.
people think
Thank
we're
you.
talking
Right.
about moving the vote.
I understand. I messed up. All right. We're going to do this again. This is to move the question. Takes a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of moving the question say aye. Those opposed? It's a unanimous vote. All right, that brings us to the main question. And the main question is whether to pass a bylaw that would impose a water moratorium as described in the motion. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed? I'm going to declare it a no vote, and if we have 7 people stand, we'll count. We'll do a count. Tellers, take your positions, please. Okay, again, this is on the main motion. All those in favor of creating the new bylaw, please raise your voting card. Okay. Just so everyone's clear, at this point we're asking all those in favor of the new bylaw to raise their voting card. Ready? Okay. All right. We'll start with the right rear bleachers.
7.
7. Right front bleacher.
7.
7. Right rear floor.
6.
6. Right center floor.
12, 1, 2.
1, 2. Right front floor, including the advisory and school committees. 3. Left rear bleacher. 7. Left front bleacher.
0.
0. Left rear floor. 1-6. Left center floor.
6.
6. Left front floor, including the selectmen, town clerk, moderator, and registrars. 3. Okay. We'll now ask all those opposed to the new bylaw to raise their voting cards.
We're very thorough.
Okay. Right rear bleachers.
18.
18. Right front bleacher.
7.
7. Right rear floor.
16, 1-6.
16. Right center floor.
9.
9. Right front floor, including the two committees. 2-4. Left rear bleacher. 18. Left front bleacher.
2.
2. Left rear floor. 1-7. Left center floor.
7.
Left front floor, including selectman, moderator, clerk. 1-7. The vote is 67 for, 135 against. Fails. One more article, and before we get to that, I just want to say thank you to the town clerk. I have not acknowledged her, and it's her and her staff that make this thing work at all, so I want to express appreciation to her for that. Okay, Article 14 is to petition the legislature to create a water commission in the town of Scituate. We have a motion.
I move that the town of Scituate petition the legislature for special legislation in substantially a similar form as follows, with the legislature being authorized to make revisions as necessary to achieve the intention of this article, to transfer the current authority of the Board of Selectmen regarding water supply to a new Scituate Water Commission, or take any other action relative thereto. Water Commission. A, the composition, the term of office. The Scituate Water Commission shall consist of 3 members selected for 3-year overlapping terms, so arranged that one term expires each year. They shall receive for their services such compensation as may be annually be provided for that purpose by appropriation by town meeting. As a transitional provision, at the first annual town election following the effective date of this act, 1 member shall be elected for a 1-year term, 1 member for a 2-year term, and 1 member for a 3-year term, so that they roll off. Powers and duties in general. The Board of Water Commissioners elected hereunder shall assume all the powers currently enjoyed by the Board of Selectmen with respect to water supply, including but not limited to planning, policy creation, and rate setting, and such other water-related works and related functions as may from time to time be vested in it through the general laws, the Scituate Town Charter, bylaws, or vote of the town meeting. C, the Water Commission shall Following each annual town election, select from its members a chairman, a vice chairman, and a clerk for the ensuing year. Indeed, the town administrator shall carry out the water commissioner's policy direction and shall continue to have day-to-day supervision over water division employees.
Thank you. Do we have a second? We have a second. We have a report from the advisory committee.
All right, so the advisory committee voted against approving this petition as well, with the same majority, 4 against the article, 3 in favor. We had a number of concerns. The 3-member board of water commissioners, currently the authority for water supply matters rests with the Board of Selectmen, and that authority would be transferred to the water commissioners. We were concerned about their compensation that would have to be paid to them. We thought it would be difficult finding residents with the required specialist skills, experience, and time. We recognize the time, effort, cost of running for office of commissioner, and the time it would take to reach the level of understanding and knowledge that already exists in the select board and the town employees. And we also noted that further funds would be required in order to pay for additional staff to support the commissioners and their directives.
Board of Selectmen?
Oops. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. In this article, we're being asked by a group of very concerned citizens to create a separate Scituate Water Commission to have exclusive charge of our water supply and our distribution system. According to the petitioners, this new board would, and I quote, develop water policies and procedures and hold the DPW Water Division accountable for them through the town administrator, similar to today's policy and workflow. I would like to point out that this is not similar at all. It would be vastly different, as the current article only provides policy power over the water department and does not outline any authority to enforce such policies. According to the petitioners, the new board would be, quote, reporting only to the voters who elect them. They would have full and complete control of the water enterprise fund revenues, including rate setting, expenditures, and capital outlay budgets. This is something to consider. An elected official is accountable to all residents in the town, not just those who vote for them. They would not have complete control over the enterprise fund revenues. These revenues would still need to be approved by you at town meeting. And the Board of Selectmen, as an elected board, also reports to the voters who elect them. A separate water commission would be no different. I think it's pretty clear from previous discussions this evening that our water supply and distribution system has been in disrepair for many years, and I don't blame residents for being frustrated. No one should have to bear the burden of brown water. We have all had enough. But adding a layer of government to fix this problem is not the answer. In the past 3 years, the town has escalated the repair work to be multifaceted and fast-tracked where possible to fix a very complicated system. As an example, as Jim said earlier, between the years of 1993 and 2006, you only approved $6.1 million worth of repairs. In comparison, in the last 13 years, we've approved $46.9 million in repairs, and we're not done. There's more to come before you. In the 2020 budget, 19% of the capital budget is outlined for water repairs. What can stand here and argue that the amount of money we are spending should be evidence enough to support maintaining the current direction and responsibility with the Board of Selectmen? But it's not. It's not just about the finances. It's about process, it's about resources, and it's about accountability. It's about governing. Let's take process. By approving a new water commission, you are not streamlining the process. I would argue that you're complicating it. You would be adding another layer of government, another layer of approvals, and another level of evaluations for all to take part in when making decisions regarding our infrastructure and rates. Yes, the Water Commission would be solely responsible for raising rates. Do you want a board that only looks at one aspect of cost increases that hit your pockets annually? Today, the Board of Selectmen and the Town Administrator prioritize and try to do our best to take into consideration all the issues that face us as a community. We prioritize our basic needs such as water and sewer, yet always have an eye on the other projects that are also necessary to provide the quality of life that you deserve. A real-world example of where a separate board is slowing down the process is our regional sewer project with Cohasset and Hull. In Cohasset, there is a separate sewer commission and a separate, obviously, Board of Selectmen. Those two boards have not aligned on the benefits of the sewer project. Thus, a regional initiative supported by state and neighboring officials is stalled and hurt by the process. We foresee this as one of the risks to forming a separate commission. Repairs and solutions to fix our brown water issues could ultimately be slowed down. Resources. Many of our water projects use shared resources within town departments, such as engineers, DPW staff, and it wouldn't be under the umbrella of the Water Commission. Many of our pipe replacement projects aren't solely financed by the water enterprise funds, as the petitioners would have you believe. In fact, much of the road repair comes from our Chapter 90 budget, which falls under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen. Shared resources in this scenario create conflicts because the allocations of such resources are not aligned under the same framework of financing and supervision. Today, in its current state, the Water Department's financing for projects is shared among many budget lines where the Board of Selectmen have complete oversight to allocate necessary funds where needed. That would not be the case with a new Water Commission. They would only have jurisdiction over the Water Enterprise Fund according to how the article is written. And lastly, let's talk about accountability. Approving a separate Water Commission creates an environment where ultimate responsibility and accountability for our water infrastructure could be at odds. If a joint decision on funding, timing, and resources is needed, who is ultimately accountable for ensuring that the project moves forward? Seldom do the resources for water projects solely come from within the Water Department. Should priorities from the Water Commission be not aligned with the town administrator, what powers do they have to enforce their desires? According to our charter and bylaws, the Board of Selectmen are the supervisors and have full authority over the town administrator, who has full authority over the DPW director. This petition states that the town administrator would have to carry out all policy direction. Who oversees the project direction? And what are the consequences if the town administrator and the Department W director do not agree with the water commissioners? That must be thought through. This petition came forth out of anger and frustration. I get it, we all understand. However, there are drawbacks to adding an additional layer of government by placing a volunteer board just to set policy. The creation of a water commission would not add additional resources, it would not expedite the timeline for improvements, and it certainly and would potentially cost taxpayers more. It will hinder the progress that is being made, and will not guarantee you a more qualified board as they may suggest, because you can't control who runs for an elected position,
30
nor
seconds.
can you dictate the qualifications. We recommend that the town continues to address the issues through civil discourse. Adding another layer of government is not the way to address these concerns. They need to be properly vetted in a manner that is conducive to creating a better system. And as the TA said earlier, let's continue to move forward as we are today. Thank you.
Further discussion? Recognize the gentleman in the center, the petitioner.
So why do we need a separate board of water commissioners? I think many of the facts have been brought out clearly tonight, and this is a long-term structural change. This isn't like a moratorium that's for a year. This is a reflection of a system that's broken, that hasn't been able to address the needs of this town over a long period of time. So that's kind of the core issue, right? And yes, the Board of Selectmen and the Department of Public Works have been doing a lot of things lately, but the overall plan that wraps around it and the basis for it and the water study that's been put off and deferred many times, that's really needed in order to have a good plan, this just isn't happening. If you look at the solutions, you know, some of them, we don't know where they're coming from. We're coming from consultants, but it doesn't seem like it's an overall plan that's going to solve our problems in the long term. As to the qualifications, I mean, if you have people who are dedicated to this, you are smart voters. You're going to pick people who can do the job, who care about the water supply, and they're going to focus on it. And in my experience in business, focus is what solves problems. When people focus their energy around specific problems and they apply their intellect, then they solve the problems. And then we can get really good people who can do this work for us and can take care of the problems. In terms of conflicts between departments, I don't know. I mean, I suppose we could become a dysfunctional town. I suppose the pavers could refuse to patch the holes where the water department puts in a new pipe. But that would be a very different town than who we are today, and that would be a town administrator who's not doing his job. I mean, I just don't see that happening. I don't see conflicts between departments. And the water department, they know when they're working on water problems. You know, they don't get confused between are they working on the water system or not. It's very focused, and they're very dedicated to solving our water problems. And they're good at it. And I just don't see that there's an administrative issue. You know, the water treatment plant, I think, is an example of the kind of infrastructure problems we have. And it was raised earlier, and I didn't really get a chance to speak to it because the DEP commended us for addressing the problems that came up. But what we addressed was the immediate problem so that we could put our water treatment plant back online. But as I understand it, there's a long-term problem waiting for us here that we haven't even begun to address, and it's because we didn't address these problems over time. It's similar with our water towers, where we just haven't kept up with the maintenance. We didn't meet our commitments to our water treatment plan, the management plan that we made to the state, that we would release water into the Herring Brook, because we don't have good plans and we're not meeting our commitments. We said we would do water banking. No one's done anything about water banking. These are things we promised to do. We said we'd bring new sources online. Now, the planning board did follow through on stormwater management, so that's really good. But most of the other recommendations from the 2003 study have not been acted on. So it's not a question of, are we doing something right now? Yes, yes, the town is doing it right now. And I think it's because there's a lot of pressure on them. There's a lot of pressure coming from the water warriors and the brown water people who are up in arms, and they're responding to it, and that's all great. But this is a long-term structural problem. We need people who are focused on our water problems so we don't have just a little bubble of attention and then it all goes away. In terms of budget inefficiencies, I think if there is an issue with some cost issues of an administrative assistant, I think compared to the $3 million and the hundreds of thousands of dollars we're spending in other places, yes, there might be some additional cost. Or the town administrator will have to attend another meeting, and so there's going to be some inefficiencies on him. But I think the value of having people who are focused on solving problems is going to be a huge benefit to the town. And I encourage you to vote in favor of this motion.
Thank you. The lady to my left.
My name is Alma Morrison. I live at 18 Tickner Court, and I've lived in Scituate for over 50 years, although I am certainly not a native. Several things that bother me about this proposal have really not much to do with water. One is the idea of another board, elected board, when we've for one thing, which is, as an earlier speaker said much better than I can, is adding a layer of complication to town government that isn't going to really help. Another thing is the concept of having a 3-member elected board. What's been found, I think, in studies that I can't quote off the top of my head, but that 5-member boards tend to be much more effective than 3-member boards because there's more opportunity for points of view and for accommodation amongst the members. Our planning board, our selectmen, our school committee are all 5-member boards, our housing authority. 3-member boards in towns that have those tend to have more internal problems, political problems, etc. I also think that bringing this to a special town meeting with a relatively few number of people here is no place to make a major, major, major change to town government, the structure of town government, and I hope this is defeated.
Thank you. Gentleman in the middle.
Paul Barkowitz, 18 Damon Lane. I move the question.
The motion for the previous question. This requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of moving the question say aye. Those opposed, nay. I declare it a 2/3 vote. Anyone challenges that, 7 people can stand. Now we move to the main motion, which is to file special legislation creating a water commission for the town of Scituate. All those in favor of the special legislation say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The noes have it. We've concluded the meeting. I would entertain a motion to dissolve. Meeting is dissolved. Thank you.